Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, is the old as shit boxer that I'm about to bet all my life savings on. It's Matt Friedman. How's it going today, Matt? You feeling good? You feeling energetic? You ready?
I didn't hear no bell.
Wait, what is that from? That's
I don't
not
know.
Rocky, is it? No. I would know a Rocky quote.
It's from something, but now it's escaping me.
That's okay. You're going to win. I have faith in you.
Yeah, it's escaping me because of all of the head trauma.
Ah, I get it. I understand the multi-layered joke that you just came up with just right now, then.
I think it's from South Park.
Okay.
I think it's Randy saying that.
You think you're probably right.
Okay.
This week on the show, our series examining Stephen King's 11/22/63 continues with part 9. We're chatting about chapters 23 through 25 of the novel. In the aftermath of Sadie's brutal assault, Jake struggles with where his priorities lie. In the end, he decides to come clean with Sadie and act against Oswald. But before he does, his reckless Back to the Future 2ing finally catches up with him. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
Well, I was correct in my guess that we were heading into basically the climax.
Yeah.
I think my only uncertainty at this point is whether we just read the climax or whether the climax is actually going to happen next week, because things really take a turn for the worse for our main character.
Yeah.
There's some really intense scenes here, by the way. So I think maybe like 2 of my favorite scenes of this book happen in this week's reading.
Oh gosh, I hope you will point out exactly which those are to me.
Sure,
Very curious.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah, I mean, as far as your climax comment, I will say that we enter part 5 of the novel, which is titled 11/22/63, and we leave this week's reading in August. So I don't think we've quite made it there yet.
I guess
Seems
so.
like this date is pretty important to everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was just toying with the concept of I'm not saying this is a prediction, but like it would be a certain direction to take, to just be like, no, he's out, he's done. It's over, you know?
Sure.
I wouldn't even think that was like a bad ending. Like I would basically feel like, yeah, you screwed up. you played your hand wrong. But I don't actually think that's going to happen. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed this too. I think this week was 97 pages. It was the most amount of pages we are going to be covering in one time this week, and a lot happens. There's lots of stuff that happens over the course of these 3 chapters that we're going to be talking about today. Characters, fall back in love, get injured. We see characters change in a lot of ways. Like I think Jake goes over some pretty big changes in who he is over the course of this week's reading. There's just a whole lot going on here. I agree, and it's all moving faster. We get some more Kennedy conspiracy stuff that we're just trying so hard to push out of our minds, but it just keeps coming back in.
Yeah. Can't help it. I mean, yeah, the book invites it, though. I continue to insist that it's not us being conspiracy nuts, it's the book.
Yeah. While also perhaps concluding on some of the stuff rather definitively, interestingly enough. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Yeah. I mean, this is a lot of pages, and there's a lot to talk about on all these pages. So I don't want to waste any more time talking about it. Let's get into it, Matt.
All right.
One more time though, before we do, Matt, can you believe that when this episode comes out, a week later from that date, I will be on a plane on my way to Bangor, Maine? Can you believe that?
Nope.
Me neither. It's here. It's here essentially. This is the last week before our trip to Bangor. Gosh, we're so excited. This is kind of our last. Hey, there's still 18 tickets left. Go out there and buy a ticket if you want to come to the live event. If you live in the area and want to come. I'm saying that because if you're planning on like flying in, that would be a very expensive flight at this point. Not that we would discourage that, just please come if you want to, but it's probably too last minute for that these days. But we hope everyone is excited. We're putting all the finishing touches on all our plans right now, and it's all coming together beautifully. And gosh, we're just so excited. So once again, for the second to last time, head to doofmedia.com/kingslingerslive and find all the information on this wonderful event that is raising money for the Bangor Public Library. Matt, I'm so excited. Someone asked me today if I was nervous, and I'm like, I mean, like, yeah, in like an abstract sense. And I'm sure the 5 minutes before we walk on stage for the actual recording part of it, I'm going to be super nervous, but like, nah, man, I'm just jazzed. I'm just ready. I'm so happy and so ready to do this.
I'm super excited, and I'm looking forward to see everybody there.
Yeah. So once again, doofmedia.com/kingslingerslive. Next week, it's all going to go down. We're going to make a lot of memories, and we will, people have been asking, we will be recording the live show as long as nothing with the audio goes wrong. We're going to release an episode that is the live audio version of the event with Robin Firth. So you will be able to hear that if you're not able to come. But no word yet on when that's going to actually be released. It depends on how much work we have to do with the audio. We're kind of just rolling the dice here. I'm bringing all my audio equipment with me. I know the convention center has their own AV setup, but we're just going to try to make those two things talk to each other and see how that goes. So that's going to happen, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll all turn out fine.
All right, Matt, chapter 23. Our chapter begins with two epistolary entries from the Dallas Morning News outlining basically the two competing stories of our novel. First, the assassination attempt on General Walker, and second, the assault of Sadie Dunhill. Two attempts at a life that happen on the same day. Both of them failed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I it's not that the idea of resonances and symmetries wasn't in the novel before, but it really explodes in this week's reading. It's just all over the place. I think it's because we are literally approaching the climax, that it ceases to kind of be this background element where you're like, that's kind of cute, I wonder what that's all about, to just really landing in certain ways. I'm still not entirely sure like what we're saying with it, but maybe we'll find some angles today, because I think it's going to come up plenty of times.
Yeah, I mean, I have some things to talk about. I think there's a kind of a beautiful monologue by Jake that he says during the Jody Jamboree portion that may perhaps unlocked some of it for me. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It takes what has been like a constant presence throughout the novel and then says, okay, we're about to just machine gun it at you at every event. Every event in this book is a reflection of some other event. Which the ongoing question is this just a fun device, or does it matter to the plot, to the themes? What are we doing here? So
exactly.
Yeah, we'll try to unlock that. Speaking though of the Dallas Morning News, Matt, that is, or should I say, was my newspaper growing up. That's the one my parents always got. Was delivered to our house, and we read. And I got reading these sections of the Dallas Morning News, I got a little nostalgic, and I looked up, how much would it cost for me to get the Dallas Morning News delivered to my house? Do you know how much it costs to have a newspaper in 2024?
I don't. I have no idea, actually.
It's $1,000 a year, Matt. It's $1,000.
That's
what?
I am. I'm no longer puzzled at the demise of print journalism.
I understand times are tough and they have to get as much money out of each individual subscriber as they can. I also think that the print version of the paper is like 50% ads these days. Like, that's how they keep the paper afloat. But like, surely no one's paying that. Like, no individual is paying that amount of money, right? Like, this is just like hotels and doctors' offices, right?
I don't know.
That's so much money. And like, the funny thing is you can get the digital version for like $5 a month. It's like,
yeah, I'm still kind of amazed at how much even the digital versions of some of these papers charge. And I get that the businesses have expenses, but at the same time, I'm like, and in this economy, and for what you're giving me, I don't really.
I mean, the problem is that like all news immediately becomes news everywhere, and so like the best you have to go for is that you have like an exclusive interview or something. Like the one time that I wish I had a subscription to something was that New York Times article about Carrie
Yeah.
on Carrie's 50th anniversary, and I was like, oh, I really wish I had a New York Times subscription. Well, fortunately, we have listeners who have. They didn't even have to do any shady piracy stuff, Matt, because the New York Times, with your subscription, you get like 3 guest things a month where you can just give someone like a guest look at an article or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So we got that from some of our listeners, and I got to read that article, and it was great. But that's like the only time, because every other thing that's news is just going to be news everywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing about social media is like, so if you ever pick up like an actual newspaper and it's not local news, you're just like, oh, I already know all of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew about it 3 days ago when it happened because I was reading about it live on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, and usually the news story doesn't have any more detail. Usually, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, of course, there still are editorials and opinions on things, but like mostly that's online too. Like I mourn the death of print media, because sometimes I like reading a magazine still, but man, for these prices, no thank you. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I asked
agree.
my dad if he still had a subscription to Dallas Morning News, because he used to, for the longest time still was getting the paper every day, and I asked him, and he's like, nah, I canceled it when it was costing me like $800 a year, so it's gone up since my dad canceled it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad, because it sounds like you and I just came out swinging at the very concept of print journalism, which is not actually my intent. It's just like, God, that doesn't work. It's not a workable business model. Hey, by the way, did you know that the New York Times is now a gaming company?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you know that the New York Times makes most of their money from video games?
I did not. What do you mean?
Like, stuff like Wordle.
Uh-huh.
And all their crossword puzzles that they have like on backlog.
Oh,
they make they bundled that out as its own subscription service, just the games, not the news. And I might be getting my details slightly off here, but they basically get more interaction from people from the games than they ever do from the news anymore.
That's wild. That's wild to me. Yeah. This has been the death of journalism section on this week's Kingslingers.
Well, yeah, it's about the inexorable march of time is what this is all about. Yep.
Yeah. I am curious about this, how you're feeling about this was, because I have this very distinct memory of the first time I'm reading this book, and I'm pretty convinced that George is going to get like discovered by one of these bookies. Like I basically convinced myself of that fact, that was an inevitable thing that was going to happen. And I have this very distinct memory of the first time I saw, because George Amberson, the name appears in the article about Sadie's injury, and I was like, oh, this is it. That's the same name. He used the same name, and so like this is an international paper, although it probably was less so in the 1960s. This is not what I was thinking about, but like I bet some guy, some bookie in Florida is going to pick up the paper and see George name, and that's what's going to happen, and we're going to be screwed. That obviously is not actually how things played out, but I had convinced myself the first time I read this book that is how it was going to play out, and I'm curious if your mind went there at all.
No, I did not. And I think if I'm going to proffer a reason, it's basically that I was just so relieved that he kind of got off scot-free.
Yeah, okay.
Because last week we were talking about like, oh, and he's going to be at the scene of this violent crime, and the cops are going to have all kinds of questions for him. And it turns out that it was just like local man George Amberson showed up later.
Yeah, they successfully managed to rewrite the events of what happened to just make like he walked through the door after everything happened.
Yeah.
And like, oh shit, everyone okay?
Yeah, it's just a coincidence. Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, oh, thank God. So I wasn't thinking about that at all. It didn't occur to me. But I like the thought, because every time, especially if you have in mind this idea that people are looking for him, it would definitely be bad for his name to show up in the paper. Yeah.
I mean, like the one thing he's kind of locked into in this whole trip to the past is that name, right? Because every piece of documentation he has, forged documentation he has, is under that name. And so he really, like in an ideal situation, after his house being burned down in Florida, he would have just started using a different name. But of course he couldn't. And so like it just felt like a thing that would pay off later. And I'm not chastising the book for not making that pay off. I just was curious if your brain went the same place mine did the first time. I feel like this is like an intentional move by King to try to like get like he's trying to amp up the stress and the tension on Jake this week
Yeah.
for sure, leading up to the moment with the mobster.
Yeah.
And like he's doing it in all these different ways, some of which pay off and some of which don't. But I think that's all intentional.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could even this is a horrible thought, but it could even continue to come into play, because if these people are able to trace him back to Jody because of this newspaper article, then that puts everyone in his life back in Jody in the crosshairs.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's true.
Which, just because it didn't happen yet doesn't mean it can't happen. So
it turns out, Matt, that Sadie's injuries are bad, like really, really bad, like Joker in the Dark Knight bad. And we see in this moment that this is where that quote that was in the beginning of the book about love and smallpox scars that we questioned, what is this doing here? This is where that pays off finally. In fact, it's just our character just states that outright. He just states that quote, which is interesting. Like that means that 2/3 of the quotes that began our book now have just been like there's actually occurred as things said in the novel itself, which I don't know how often that happens with Stephen King's like quotes beginning things that they take place in the book itself. It didn't happen that often. Every once in a while.
Yeah, we've done a bunch of these books, and I'm hard pressed to think of a single example, although I'm sure there's at least one in there.
The only one I can think of off the top of my head is in Doomickey, when he had the quote from the made up band that was by the Losers from Derry. He is, I believe, listening to that actual song at some point while painting. So that's kind of sort of that, but also not really. That's
true. Also, another one that comes to mind is first come smiles, then lies, last is gunfire, rather.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe he just does this all the time. We're just wrong.
Maybe. But that's all I can think of. Those two.
Yeah, we've done a lot of books. But if we can think of two in like 30 seconds, it means there's probably more.
There's probably more. You're right.
Yeah. I guess the point here, though, Matt, is that Sadie is really, she's not doing well. Like mentally, this has absolutely destroyed her. Like she says she's going to quit her job. She never wants to show her face again. She's not eating. And this is, I think, when the thought first pops into our head, perhaps. And of course, as we'll see Jake's, that, hey, wait a minute. She'd have a lot more success with all the plastic surgery she's going to need if she lived in 2011. That would seem to solve a lot of our problems. And that's kind of the first real indication that the book is saying of, oh, maybe one solution to Jake's problem is to take Sadie home with her. And we'll see that becomes textual and a much bigger focus of the novel later. But this is kind of the first introduction of it.
Yeah. I think that thought even occurred to me last week, even though the book didn't draw our attention to it, because I can't promise that, but I think it was like, I think that was maybe the first time that the thought of anyone even going back through the portal with Jake occurred to me at all. Now, I will say, I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
This is my prediction. I don't think she's going to go back through the portal with him.
Why do you think that? Like, I guess in what way? Like, what's going to happen that can't happen or won't happen?
I mean, either she dies and that can't happen, or like they try to go back to the door and it just doesn't exist anymore. Like they, 11/22/62 happens, 63. and they go back to the place where the door is and it's not there anymore.
Okay.
Or like they start going up the stairs together, or like Jake starts going up the stairs and the stairs just aren't there for her. Like it's just like the stairs are there, but not for her.
Like a heartbreaking Titanic moment where they just can't be on the door at the same time.
Yes, the magical stairs are the door. Actually, that was I kind of said those in the reverse order of how they occurred to me. The first one, for some reason, was like we have no reason to really believe that this door is open to people from 19 that from the past.
Yeah.
Like that's simply never been shown.
Sure.
So I don't know. Like I don't put a lot of weight on that one, because after I thought about it, I was like, well, clearly it goes both ways, because a person can go down and a person can go up. So it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. But anyway, these were the thoughts going through my head. I could easily think of several ways that things could go wrong. Or Jake just is like in jail and he can't he can't go anywhere, right?
You can't get back. Yeah.
Could totally be wrong. Another thought that's occurred to me is like they do go to the future and then Sadie dies shortly thereafter anyway, in some tragic way. That maybe it's just that we read Doomickey recently, but the idea of a character like, hey, we did it, my man, we beat the odds, high five. He died 3 days later. And you're like, fuck you. that seems like the kind of thing that King does, So
I think you're being a little negative here. I mean, how often do Stephen King love stories end tragically? Like almost never, right?
I don't have it indexed that way in my head. I don't. I feel like all the ones I can think of right now end tragically.
Psh, whatever.
Can I think of any that don't end tragically?
Matt, it's gonna be fine, okay? Everything's gonna work out. Why are you being so negative?
Yeah. I guess Bev and Ben end up together. I guess that's one.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you for proving my point for me.
Okay, all right. I feel much better now after your extremely earnest and frank counseling here.
I appreciate that. I think it's important for us to keep our heads straight. This is a love story. Love stories are good and happy, and everything works out. They're going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Let's move forward.
Okay.
We also, Matt, I just wanted to circle back to this one last time because we actually get confirmation that the Plymouth Fury, the Christine that Jake was seeing everywhere, actually just was Johnny Clayton's car. Like I think we basically knew that, and like I was almost hesitant to just declare it outright last week because I couldn't remember if we had definitely known it at that point or not yet. But the basic confirmation is yes, which is fun, right? I mean, it's a fun way of doing this thing because no, this one is not literally Christine, right? This car is just a Plymouth Fury, but it's just the way the King Easter eggs are just fun sometimes when it's just like, yeah, this car is evil. Everyone that is a constant reader knows this car is evil. And so I'm going to put this car in and people are going to know it's evil and it'll be a fun treat for people. Look, it's the evil car. Johnny Clayton's in the evil car.
Yeah. That was basically my feeling was that it's just a red flag. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one way, on the way out of the hospital, Jake is approached by Bobby, Jill, and Mike, who are just there to kind of to check on how Sadie is doing. But they also have an idea, Matt, and it's an idea. It's a brilliant idea, completely original idea that no one's ever thought of before. It's the Jody Jamboree again. They're just going to do the thing that they did for Bobby, Jill, but they're going to do it. They're just going to do it again this time for Miss Dunhill. And I don't know, like there was part of me that got tickled by this whole thing because Jake is like, yes, once again, the past harmonizing with itself. And I mean, really, it's just like, hey, we did this the first time and it worked real well. And here's someone with a similar accident. So why don't we do that? Like, I guess technically that is the past harmonizing with itself, but it's also just like people iterating on good ideas. I don't like, do we call that the harmony? I don't know, maybe, but I thought it was kind of funny because I think the line is like, I listened to their idea and I agreed. Sometimes when the past harmonizes with itself, the wise man clears his throat and sings along. And that's just like, this isn't like some kind of weird, like magical harmonization. This is just two people that are like, hey, we did this thing last time and it was good. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I off base here?
I don't think you're totally off base. I mean, I think the reason why I'm just confused by this stuff is that I don't fundamentally feel that I understand what King is saying when it comes to his repeated theme and motif of cycles and resonances and synchronicities, which comes up over and over, like all the way back to like Ka is a wheel.
Mm-hmm.
He loves this idea of cycles and things, characters repeating themselves and being stuck in cycles, and situations repeating themselves, and twinners. And I like, it's everywhere. It's in like every book. And it's the one thing where I'm like, but why? Like other than like, it is a, I think, an interesting literary device in that allows you to draw attention to something by just being like, oh, this is like the other thing. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then you're more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, that can't be it though. I don't think but I don't know what else. Like, I really feel dumb when it comes to this. Like, and I think like we don't talk about this much. Like we mention it, I guess, when it comes up. Oh yeah, this is another example of Ka as a wheel. But I'm like, I don't know what exactly the purpose or I don't get it. And so the reason I bring that up here when you point this out is I'm like, I can't even say whether this is like a meaningful harmonization or not, because I don't fundamentally understand like why he chooses to do this in the first place.
Yeah, fair. I have a theory I want to posit, but I'll wait till we get to the section to actually do that. But I think you're right, and I think the thing with me is like when I hear him talk about, especially in this book, this kind of harmonization, to me it seems like this kind of mystical, like this is just the universe behaving this way, like in this kind of almost magical, mystical, like, oh, isn't that weird, like out of anyone's hands kind of way. Like just the idea in general that Sadie is sliced in the face in the same spot that Bobby Jill is, like that is the kind of thing we're talking about in my mind. Is that like, isn't it weird that history seems to repeat itself? Isn't it weird that things seem to occur as echoes? I think he says later. That's strange. But this particular thing, this particular part, and the reason why this stood out to me so much is like is not like this mystical power influencing echoes in the world. It's just people seeing something and then respond. It's just clearly a chain of cause and effect. And it's less magical and mystical and inexplicable and more just, it totally makes sense why Bobby Jill of all people would see someone injured similar to how she was and say, I've got an idea on how we can help her, because it's the idea that was used for me.
Yeah. You're not at all like, what a strange coincidence. You're just like, obviously, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So I don't know. I want to circle back around to this again a little bit later, but just food for thought for now.
Yeah.
Back in his other life, though, Jake hears a conversation between De Morenschildt and Lee as they discuss the attempted assassination of General Walker. Unfortunately, Matt, there's nothing here that definitively says that George was not involved in the assassination. So that window of uncertainty that Jake was hoping to close on the 10th still remains. And basically, he decides that no attempt on Lee's life can be made at this point. Matt, I know last week you basically said that you kind of figured that at this point, perhaps after these events, Jake would kind of drop the pretense of needing like certainty to do this, and was either going to decide to do it or not to do it. But it still seems like he's still kind of pushing off the decision making. And I'm just curious what your take on this was.
Yeah, I guess my take is not too different. I think he's gathering irrelevant data, and I want to be specific because I think this is, I don't know, something I was thinking about quite a bit. I think this is one of the things the book makes you think about is like, if he had heard Morenschildt say, I can't believe I missed Walker when I took that shot using your rifle, then okay, yeah, like, yes, it would have been good for Jake to have heard that, obviously. But he didn't hear that. And like the null result of just sort of not hearing anything conclusive is diagnostically useless. It's like, it's a useless test. And so, Morenschildt in this scene, he's not saying that he wasn't involved. He's just not saying that he was involved, and that doesn't mean that means nothing, right? So it's like it's down to the difficulty of proving a negative, and so Jake is just stuck in this place where he can't really actually ever deduce it by just listening in, and is just sort of hoping that someone will say something, which they're not going to say. Which is why I actually. So the evolution since last week was basically just me feeling like satisfied basically when he decided he was going to just ask Morenschildt, because I was like, oh, like this is a test that can actually yield a result one way or the other. You can actually find out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and maybe is the sort of thing he could have done from the beginning. Not that the idea occurred to me necessarily, but
Yeah. I mean, incredibly risky though. I mean, placing yourself in the House of Cards in a way that he has kind of remained outside of up until this point, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, that's true. So like speaking of the House of Cards, though, I wanted to talk about this for a second because I think this is another fun thing this book has done to me, is it has like really caused me to poke at my way of approaching these time travel problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, you and I, or at least I'll take responsibility. Okay, I have said so many times in this show, like, why doesn't he just go through the portal and shoot Oswald and then go back, setting aside the fact that Oswald's not in the U.S. at the time? Okay, like, there are totally different ways that you could approach this, though. Like for example, as soon as Oswald arrives, you just surreptitiously get him an envelope containing like $5,000 and a letter that tells him to move to Alaska and never come back. Or tell him the FBI is after him or something and that he needs to hit the road. And or like if Jake wants to keep an eye on him, then Jake can, let him stay in Dallas and stay near him, but just sort of consistently screw with him in ways that actually make his life better. and like just make his life so busy and enjoyable that he never has any time to think about communism or Kennedy. And then if Kennedy is still assassinated in this timeline, then hey, it definitely wasn't Oswald. Right? so like it's just funny to me that it never occurred to me until like this long of thinking about this book that there are many ways that you could sort of approach this that don't look like just like killing Oswald. I think part of it is that you think of Oswald as this villain who deserves death, but it's like, well, not if you get him before he does any of the bad stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I will say, like, I do think this book does a pretty good job, one way or the other, kind of hedging against these kind of complaints, though. Like, I actually think, like, that one in particular, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I do think the book has put up a pretty good explanation in that House of Cards argument, in this idea that if you the advantage you have in this whole thing is that you know exactly where Oswald's going to be and when he's going to be there. You have the power of history on your side. And the second you start messing with him or changing him or influencing him in any real tangible way, you lose that completely. Suddenly, if he was supposed to be here on Friday, April 10th at 2 p.m., he's not going to be there anymore. And then you have no way of tracking him efficiently without any of the real advantages you have. Like one of the big advantages is right now Jake goes to the bus stop when he knows that Lee Harvey Oswald is going to New Orleans. He knows the exact date. He knows the time. He knows when he's going to get on that bus. Like, he knows all these things. You start messing with that and you lose that. And I think the book builds this idea that he's terrified of doing anything like that because he doesn't want to take that advantage away he has. So I mean, I feel like everything that we've talked about and pondered, like, there's reasons behind it for sure.
Oh yeah, like, I know that he wants to make a controlled experiment, I guess you could say, but I'm just saying that it occurred to me that you could do a sort of very different kind of experiment where you just maximize the disruptions that you're making and you sort of specifically target them at Oswald, but not necessarily in a way that's like negative. Like you're not killing him. You're just making it so that there's no way that he would ever like want to assassinate Kennedy. And then suddenly you've basically gained data. You've gained the same data, but in a very different way.
Yeah. I think another way of putting this is that he's not, I don't think Jake or Al ever looked at this trip or this goal as just experimenting to determine what really happened. I think they looked at it as, we're going to go back in time, we're going to close the window of uncertainty, and we're going to kill Oswald, and that's what's going to happen. There's not going to be any head back to 2011 and check and see what happens and then rethink our ink. Like, I don't think that was ever part of the equation. Of because, you know, Jake says a little bit later, like the idea of having to relive all that, the idea of having to do all that again to experience everything he's gone through over these past 5 years again sounds like exhausting and insurmountable to him. Like, there's no way he's going to do it.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I think you're basically right. I think you are right, especially within the sort of magical paradigm of how time travel works in this book, where it's like time is resistant to being changed and all this stuff.
And within the bounds of the characters, because like it is factually true that going back in time, shooting Lee Harvey Oswald in the head the second you have the ability to do so, and then popping back to 2011 and check-in is the easiest, most logical way to operate in this plot, right?
Yeah.
But the book has made it pretty clear at this point, and it states it again here this week in this week's reading, that is something that Jake is just completely unwilling to do. That he cannot kill this man until he is absolutely sure, or absolutely to a level of I guess reasonable doubt, going back to our 12 Angry Men comparison, that he is the one responsible. And it's just, this is who he is as a person, this is who he is as a character, this is his trait, his flaw, what have you. And it creates this plot and creates this conflict and creates these problems that he has to overcome. Yes, I mean 100%. Like, if we're munchkining this book, just go back in time, shoot the guy in the head, pop back up and see. It's like, oh nope, didn't work. Okay, rethink. I don't know, but that's just not what this story operates under at all.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think actually one takeaway from that I'm learning from this book, and really I think this is a thing that's true of all actually really good time travel plots, is that it's really a way of exploring character.
Yeah.
Not a way of talking about how to cleverly exploit time travel. Because generally speaking, the characters are not being clever when it comes to time travel movies.
Yeah, I mean, and in the cases that they are, like Primer, I think, is a really great example of this wonderful movie that does indeed explore how to be clever with time travel, right?
Yeah.
With the rules of time travel that exist in that story. But again, it is a story about how the characters react to that time travel and how they behave and why they behave that way and why they make the choices they make. It's not just, oh, isn't this clever that I do this and I could do this and I could outthink my opponent this way. That's in the story and it's what makes the story great, but it is driven by all the character stuff, even that one.
I was it's funny you say that, because Primer was the one that I was thinking is like, that's the most munchkin-y of all the time travel movies that I can think of, and yet even that one, and they're still motivated by character choices. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So a little digression there, but no, I think this is a fun conversation to continue to have over the course of this book. And I think this leads into my next point, which is that, like, he feels that how actually could I kill Lee Harvey Oswald at this point? He's trying to decide whether he wants to kill him or not. And he's like, wait a minute, how could I actually do this? And he realizes that he doesn't actually have too many options for this, or at least we should say he doesn't have too many options on how to kill Lee Harvey Oswald that don't result in him needing to flee immediately back to Maine and back to 2011. And at this point, he basically feels like he can't do that, or he won't do that. That like, he needs to come up with an option, a plan that involves him getting to stay with Sadie, either bringing her to 2011 or living with her in 63. Like that it, like, he's now added a new constraint to this whole thing, that it's like any murder that he has to commit now, he has to, in his essence, completely make sure he gets away with it.
Yeah. I mean, this is the least surprising thing in the world for us as readers, I think, to sure. Like, he's just finally catching up to the fact that, like, he has created a really bad situation for himself where he almost can't follow through with his mission. Like, he's made it very difficult for himself.
Yep.
Like he'll have to either kill Oswald in a way that's so diabolical as to make it look like an accident, or just, like you said, escape with Sadie. But it's like, even that, I mean, again, I have this strong sense of like, that just doesn't sound practical to me. That sounds like I mean, maybe that'll happen, but it sounds like wishful thinking. It sounds like him just being like, I know, I'll just take Sadie to the future. And it's like, that just strikes me as somewhat ridiculous. Like, I guess we're skipping ahead because I was going to talk about this later, but just on a practical level, going back in time, it's really easy to falsify your documents because the past didn't have bookkeeping. Going forward in time is much harder, much harder to falsify Sadie's documents. And, like, where did this woman come from? Where she doesn't have a social security card. She doesn't have, there's no record of her in our extensive and eternal record keeping system. And, what's her credit rating? How is she going to get a job? Like all these things never occurred to him, which is one of the things I mean when I say it feels like wishful thinking. Is he's just like, oh yeah, I'll just take her to the future. And it's like, dude, are you going to get health insurance? Where are you going to get the money to pay for the surgeries? Like none of this occurs to him at all, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That 2011, the surgeries are so much better. Like, yeah, absolutely, which is a true statement, right? That like in 2011, they would be able to do things with plastic surgery on her face that they absolutely could not do. I mean, the text comes right out and says this, right? Like the doctor says, like, hey, maybe in 20 or 30 years we'll have this technology, but not right now. King's being very obvious here and getting you to think about that thing before Jake even thinks about it. But you're so right. I mean, since we're jumping ahead, like one of the things that I really paid attention to this time was the first time he's considering bringing Sadie back with him. He says something to the effect of, he compares her to Marina Oswald and says he doesn't want to kind of maroon her in this strange land of like that, where she doesn't even speak the language or understand what's going on. He seems to be very conscious of this idea of how incredibly disruptive it would be to bring her to essentially an entirely new world. But then later, when things are more desperate and like he's excited that she's along with it, she asks what it's like there, and he's basically like, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And that's like, not only is that just to us, the reader, obviously untrue, but it's untrue within the context of the book as well, because one of the things that Jake made such a big deal about the first time he went back to 1958 was how fucking different it was. Like I remember very distinctly when he walks into the bank and it like is commenting on how different everything in this bank is, and making the connection that, oh, this place is closer in relation to Dickens than it is my world. And so like, it's just, I think this is a great way King is kind of tipping his hand that like Jake has stopped thinking rationally about some of these things at all.
100%. I was thinking the same thing because he spent the whole first year he was in the past thinking about it was a radical culture shock for him, right? And not just technological, not just a technological shock of getting used to not having power windows, but just like profound culture shock that he's still sort of reeling from even now. And it would be in some senses worse for Sadie, I think, because at least he knew what he was getting into in some way. Like he's watched movies. He's aware of what happened in the past. But for her, it's going to be a very weird world. She will know no one, obviously, which it was true for Jake too. But again, I think he just had a better sense of what he was buying into, and he could always go back. That's another thing to keep in mind. He could always just bail and go back to 2011 and go back to his life. Once she goes through that door, she cannot go back through the door. There will be another Sadie back there if she does that.
And who knows the implications of that at all? Like what would in this world of time travel, like does a universe allow that kind of thing to exist? We don't even know. But I think this is really interesting stuff that I think King is definitely layering in there for us to pick up on. Like I once again, that quote about him just kind of dismissing her questions about what it's like there as, pretty much, it's pretty much the same, not like that. We're supposed to clock that and be like, You sure about that, Jake? Remember when you drank that root beer and we're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this is the best root beer I've ever had.
Right.
No root beer has ever tasted like, but yeah, everything's, pretty much the same between these two time periods. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the result of this conversation is basically, this internal conversation that Jake's having is basically to not make a decision on whether to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. He instead just retreats back to the safety and comfort of Sadie. When he returns to the hospital, he finds out, Matt, that her parents have been there, and what's worse is they carpooled with John Clayton's parents. They shared a ride to like. It's just what I love Jake's like absolute shock at this idea.
Yeah.
Like, because yeah, I mean, me too. I'm like, seriously? Like, I know, it's not the parents' fault that the kid is crazy and just disfigured your daughter, but maybe it is a little bit. But I mean, basically what we're doing here, Matt, is we're setting up Sadie's mother is an echo, essentially, of Lee Harvey Oswald's mother, right? Like, the text comes right out and says this is like, oh yeah, I've met this woman before. She's Marguerite Oswald. Like, this is what we're doing. But here I have to question, what are we doing here, Matt? I mean, we already talked about this a little bit, so we don't have to spend too much time on it here. But like, another issue of another beat of harmonization that is just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I feel like, so another thought that I had, just here is like, maybe the harmonies arise to draw Jake's attention to these specific elements so that he can learn something from them. I guess one thing you can think about is like who or what is causing the harmonies. Like, because it's like, oh, it's just the past harmonizes. Like, well, maybe. Like that makes it seem like it's like physics, like it's just a natural phenomenon. In which case, I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with that. But if it's like the turtle, the agent of order in the universe is creating these harmonies to draw your attention to certain things, to make you think about things in a certain way, to make him think about Oswald's mother and how, Oswald's mother is kind of like Sadie's mother. Does that mean that in some ways Oswald is kind of like Sadie? Like, is that a question that the universe, the turtle, whatever, wants Jake to be asking? Maybe. I don't know. This is I know, maybe I feel like I'm reaching a bit here, but it's like the harmonies. I think we're right to sort of question whether some of these harmonies are real. Like he's seeing shapes in clouds that aren't there. But I think some of these harmonies are real, and it's like, if so, maybe their purpose is just to cause him to ask these questions and then maybe make different choices after having asked those questions.
Sure. No, I like that. The result of the conversation with Sadie, though, Matt, is that Jake moves back to Jody and essentially lets Lee go. He basically decides, I'll get him later.
Yeah.
And so he moves back to Jody, and I just want to say, like, it's not that we're being critical on the Jake Sadie romance, because, like, if I'm being entirely honest with myself, I love this shit. Like, this line here really got me. Sadie says, "You can't want me," she said in this voice just above a whisper, "not the way I am now. But I do." She looked at me with eyes that were afraid to hope, and hoped anyway. Why would you? Because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Man, I love this shit. I love their romance. I love every bit of it. And it's not as if I want it to fail horribly. It's not as if I want it to be true that Sadie's never coming back to 2011 with him. I just think that on top of layered in with all this romance, this wonderful romance, is rationality. And I can't help but see both simultaneously. And it's because I love the romance that I notice the other stuff so much, actually.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. The Sadie-Jake relationship honestly feels more real and vivid than any other romantic pairing in any King work that I have read, bar none. I think I can state that firmly. I'm very invested in this relationship, more so than I have been in any other. I'm saying this mainly because like I know this is going to end poorly and make me really sad, and I think I'm going to be like really sad actually, because I don't know, like when King tells you that something's going to end badly, usually that's enough for me to be like, okay, well, I'll start preparing for that then. And then when it happens, it kind of leaves you with a wistful feeling of bittersweetness. But in this case, I'm just like, this book is going to make me cry, isn't it? Like this book is like even seeing where it's going, I can tell that I'm going to be so sad. And I don't want to say I'm looking forward to that because I'm actually dreading it is probably a more proper way of saying it. But I guess like I don't know, this book has its hooks in me in a way that is slightly unusual, maybe. And that's good.
Yeah, I mean it's because it's a really fucking good book, man. It's
Yeah.
it's just really really good character work, and I agree with you. Like I was thinking as you were talking about like the other relationships and romantic relationships in Stephen King stories, and like I mean I think Eddie and Susanna I love to death, but I think the complexities of this relationship and like the time we spent falling in love with these characters, not just as characters but as a couple, I think is better here in my mind. That might be sacrilege to say. I think that there's also the Roland and Susan of it all, but that is such a like a teen high school like love type relationship that like this is so much more adult and real to me than the absolute real feelings of incredibly powerful lust and attraction and love that Roland and Susan felt for each other. I'm not diminishing any of that at all, but like this is two people that when they say they love each other, like I deeply believe that they have these incredibly complex feelings of love and attraction. And like I think the big thing is also I understand why Jake loves Sadie. Like I completely understand. I can see it. I know why. And the same vice versa, right? And there's sometimes in some of these relationships where I'm just like, I don't understand why these people are liking each other, except that the book says they should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much on the same page with all of that. I think part of it is just they're both very lovable people too, and you want the best for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it's in the Eddie and Susanna situation. It's almost like look like these people are like warriors on this quest, and so and like you know that the stakes are life and death, and it's a very elevated type of tone. Whereas in this book, it's a very grounded book. Like we spend most of this week talking about like the medical recovery from a surgery, right? It's like it's very grounded in these human level tragedies and struggles, and that I think activates my empathy in a more like you can imagine this happening to a friend of yours or your neighbor, whereas dying in a shootout with interdimensional bandits is not really relatable, even though it's obviously a sad moment. It's just it resonates a little bit more personally, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. Yeah, like again, not to diminish Eddie and Susanna at all, but I think how am I going to say this doesn't come off mean? I think their love of Roland and the quest always felt stronger to me than their love for each other. Ooh, I don't even know if I like saying that.
It's just,
but I think it might be true. I love them as a couple, and like they're such a good married couple that definitely deeply love each other and were bonded. I think it's almost this idea of they bonded over the shared quest, and it always felt like the bond would survive as long as the quest does, and only as long.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know I feel like uncertain saying these things because I'm not sure if I fully believe them.
Well,
but
I have a simpler explanation, which is just they were not the focus of the story.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fair.
They're two important side characters in a giant story, whereas the Sadie Jake romance like is the story
Yeah.
actually, like
Yeah.
the equal parts love story and time travel story, really.
No, well said. I agree. That's definitely the reason.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so this next portion of the book, Matt, involves Jake's time back in Jody over the summer, essentially living at Sadie's house, though still walking the 2 miles there every night so as not to leave his car parked in front of her home. Even home and even with Jake, we see that Sadie is not doing well. She's not eating. She's got constant nightmares. She probably needs to be talking to a therapist, but of course it's 1963, so no one even mentions maybe doing that at all. And just this is a thing that once again strikes me, Matt, as George/Jake is the perfect person for Sadie in this moment. The perfect person for Sadie is a man from 2011, a man who would perhaps be more willing to take care of a woman in this way than most men of the decade would. Right? He's got to cook, he's got to clean, he's got to change her sheets when she pees in them. He's got to be understanding of her mental state. And look, I'm not saying that all men or indeed people in 2011 would have that kind of patience and perspective, and I'm not saying that all people in 1963 would not, but like certainly more, right? Like certainly like this is much less likely to happen in 1963 with a man from 1963 than it is with a person from 2011, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed it out. Not something that occurred to me, but yeah, I do think this is sort of an anachronistic behavior, somewhat. I think which indicates or justifies some of some of Sadie's like surprise and shock and disbelief that he would be willing to do this.
Yeah. She's what's we talked earlier how Sadie kind of in many ways reflects the culture she was born into and the period she lives in, and like her complete like kind of shock and inability to like accept that he would want to do these things and still want to be with her, and it is not necessarily a reflection of the culture, is more a reflection of her own insecurities that were brought about by her parents and her husband and all these things, but I think also cast a somewhat reflect on the time she lives in.
Yeah. Also, just wanted to comment that Jake is walking 2 miles from his car to her house every day.
Uh-huh.
Just park around the corner, dude.
No, they'll find out, man. They'll find out. Those fucking Karens of 1963, telling you.
And they're not going to see you on your daily 2-mile walk.
He's just
Jake.
He's just walking, man.
Okay, all right.
Don't ruin his dreams, okay? No, that is quite the walk. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I walk 2 miles a day, just existing.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, a 2-mile walk at a leisurely pace would probably take at least 40 minutes. I was going to say,
yeah,
that's not a trivial time investment when it's not, in my opinion, strictly necessary. But I get what we're doing. It's thematic. Fine, yeah. Set it aside.
Yeah. He also doesn't have a job right now, so like, what's he doing?
Yeah, true.
Our chapter ends with Jake heading to the bus stop and watching Lee head to New Orleans, and then he thinks about putting a bet down on the Derby to get some more money, but he decides not to at the last minute, and this is when he brings up this old idea of hunch think. That he has this nagging hunch think that it would not be a good idea to place this bet at this time, and so he backs off and doesn't do it. So good, Jake.
Yeah, good. For what it's worth, I guess. Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that bothers me about this week's reading, and maybe you can help counsel me on this, because I just don't know what to do with this element where he keeps getting these hunches and these warnings and these chimes in his head, and it ends up just not mattering, or at least it seems like it, because he still gets fucked up anyway. It's kind of like if you give your character, Sting, a magic blade that glows when orcs are near, and then they get caught off guard by orcs anyway because they didn't bother checking the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And like, then why give them Sting in the first place? It just,
well, if you were trying to make a point that the character is given Sting but chooses not to use Sting for whatever personal character reason.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. I'm just like, what is it about Jake that makes him So, um, I don't even know what his flaw is here,
So
like in
so
this particular sense.
to me, Sadie is a blind spot for him, and
Mm-hmm.
I think overall a lot of the things we see him do over these few chapters is representing this idea of Sadie as a blind spot, where he he knows, like, he's able to suss out danger. He has a pretty good acuity to
Hmm.
these hunch thinks, these moments of I feel like this oncoming danger, but it seems to be either minimized or put aside when it comes to Sadie, because, like, we're going to talk about this when he places the bet in Fort Worth, but come on, man.
Yeah.
Like come on, like if you drive by the bookie that you placed a bet at last time and see what could possibly be Florida plates, and the crazy man who probably burned your house down is posting up in front of the bookie's office, then maybe just stop placing bets altogether.
Yeah.
Just be done with that. Just don't do that anymore. Just say, well, I guess that time in my life is done unless I move across the country or something. And even then, it might not be safe. Um, but just to be like, oh no, see, what I'll do is I'll just go to Fort Worth, which is 30 minutes away,
Hmm.
and there's no possible way that a bookie in Fort Worth, Texas, would ever speak or know or have a relationship with the bookie in Dallas, Texas.
Uh-huh.
No, that would never happen.
Right.
And so, I mean, ultimately, I agree with you. Like, this hunch thing gets him nowhere, but I think that's the point. I think,
Yeah.
he survived this the first time around because of the hunch think, because he got the hell out of there early enough to avoid being caught in his house burning down. But this time he is not fully thinking things out,
Yeah.
and is kind of not listening to that hunch think, because why is he getting the money in the first place, right? It's because he's spending so much money on Sadie's medical
Right.
bills and surgeries and everything. That's why he needs the extra money.
Yep. You've totally solved it for me. In fact, I think you just connected things that were separate in my head, and also just like separate in our script document that I just hadn't like plugged together. Because it's like, yeah, like his life is so hard right now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you step back from the book and you just think about like what is going on, like the stress that he's under as everything is culminating with Oswald, as this horrible thing happened to his girlfriend who he loves, and like he has to get this money, right? It's so to fix my metaphor, it's like you give your character Sting and you show them using Sting to avoid danger several times because like they're able to, like
Mm-hmm.
it's easy, but then it's like, well, now you just have to go into orc territory because
Mm-hmm.
there's no other option. So like maybe the sword is glowing but you can't turn back.
Yeah.
Like
Well, and he does, like, we're jumping all over the place this week, but that's fine. He does feel the sword glowing at the
yeah,
very end there, right? Like,
yeah,
it's he pieces it together just like maybe half an hour too late.
yeah, right. But again, I think that works. Like that actually works for me narratively because
Mm-hmm.
he's run ragged. He's juggling too many balls. You know, when he ran away uh, uh, to avoid the house being burned down, like that was a point in his life when he had no attachments.
Yeah.
He could just afford to cut and run very
Yep.
easily. He absolutely cannot cut and run now. Like he needs to do these things. He
Yeah.
has a lot of things that he's tied down by.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe if he wasn't caught here, he would have been caught the next day, right? Like these guys
Yeah.
were after him. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I like it. All right, Matt. Chapter 24. Chapter 24 sees the return of the Jody Jamboree, in which we learn that Sadie doesn't even want to participate in. Charity is all well and good, she says, when it's going to other people, but not me. And I can't be too hard on Sadie for that, because, like, that's me also. Like, I have a very, very hard time with people giving me money in the first place. I have an even harder time with people with having to ask people for money.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, I felt awkward asking people to buy tickets to our live event even though I knew that money was going to a charity that wasn't me, that
Uh-huh.
I was not going to make basically a cent off of this whole thing. It still felt weird to me to ask for that. And so I just completely get this idea of like, no, I don't want charity. No, please, no.
Well, that's why, much like for Sadie, you got to find some friends who will create the situation for you where you're getting the
Indeed,
money from people. Yeah,
indeed. Give me money.
yeah, me too.
That's you, right? That's what you're positing there, is you're that person for me.
Yes, that's me.
Wait, were you?
I was actually positing the nice people who are helping us organize.
Oh yeah, Jody and Sam, of course,
Jody and Sam,
yes.
yeah.
They thank you, Jody and Sam,
Yeah.
for allowing us to ask people to buy tickets to do something great for a great cause, because we would have never had the comfort to do that ourselves, for sure.
Yeah, that's the primary joke. The other joke is that I am always pushing you to think about money. But that's
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
money.
Money.
I like money. I just don't like asking for it.
I know.
I really liked this part though, where I think Jake is like wishing that Sadie would attend the Jamboree. She's basically said she's not going to, and he really wishes he would, and he does, because he says the crazy people of the world, the Johnny Claytons, the Lee Harvey Oswalds, shouldn't get to win. If God won't make it better after they do have their shitty little victories, then ordinary people have to. They have to try, at least. I like this as another kind of reflection on the overarching uh theory of that is the King universe, right? This idea
Yeah.
of like, because we've seen the ways in which the gods that exist in this universe do and don't step in and do things and help, and it's often the answer is they don't. It's not more than it is.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny. We've said the phrase "the banality of evil" a million times, but it's never occurred to me to say like the banality of good. But I think that I mean, you can sort of draw that parallel where like a lot of the things that Jake does are sort of very mundane. I mean, banal has a negative connotation to me, but very mundane, simple human acts of kindness and goodness.
Yeah.
And those, counteract or compensate for, in some sense, the banal evils done by the Johnny Claytons and Lee Harvey Oswalds. Even shooting Kennedy, which is this world historic event, is a mundane evil. There's no, cackling demon telling him to do this. So, yeah, I agree. This is a great little note along those lines.
Yeah, I like that. Especially, dealing with, we're just trying to raise a little bit of money for a person that needs help. And this idea that Jake wants to live in a world in which these mundane good things can overcome the great evil, the great bad, even if it's mundane bad that exists in the world.
Which I think again ties into this conversation, this ongoing conversation where it's like that is really what he should be spending his time on, probably, and not, because what he is doing is a supernatural quest to fight evil.
Yeah.
He's trying to do this big epic thing, and it's like, well, maybe that's not what he should be doing, actually.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Cool.
I like that we're having that conversation. That this is not what you should be doing, Jake. I like that.
Yeah.
We learned that everyone and everything is going great for the Jamboree, except for one small problem here, Matt. 2 members of the school board refuse to allow it to take place at the school because they don't want the school to be associated with the unsavory nature by which the injury occurred. This is this is so important. I bring this up for many reasons. I think, one, this is going to pay off a little bit later with one of the school board members that Jake has a confrontation with, and 2, I just think this is a way in which our character, who, as we recall, was so nostalgic about this time period when he first came back to it, like, the air is brighter, tastes better, the root beer tastes better, the people are friendlier, everything's simpler, everything's good here, and he's just growing sick of it. And it's stuff like this. It's stuff like just the idea that people don't want to be associated with a woman who's brutally attacked by her insane ex-husband because of just the implications of that, are just a thing that drives Jake crazy. And I love what Deke says about this. He says, "Grow up, George. Sometimes you act like you were born in a barn or some country where folks actually think straight. To them, it's about sex. To folks like Fred and Jessica, it's always about sex. They probably think Alfalfa and Spanky and the little rascals spend their spare time diddling Darla out behind the barn while Buckwheat cheers them on. And when something like this happens, it's the woman's fault. They wouldn't come right out and say so, but in their hearts they believe men are beasts and women who can't gentle them, well, be it on their own heads, son. Be it on their own heads." So this is Deke, speaking frustration with the time he lives in, but it also reflects on our character about, hey, this place sucks, actually. And it's not to say that 2011 and the 2010s and the present don't have our own problems. Certainly we do, but at least we don't have this bullshit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think King was feeling optimistic about the future when he wrote this, because he's sort of thinking of the future as a place where people think straight, and definitely like just to not be like a cynical shit for 5 seconds. Like, yes, 2011, 2024. I think our moral thinking is generally directionally better than it was in 1963.
It doesn't mean we live in a utopia
No.
and everything's great and there's no problems. Certainly not. But I agree with you. Morally, I think the populace is in a better place with a lot of these kind of things.
Yeah.
In general, obviously, there's still people that would believe exactly as these characters are spouting right now.
Right.
But I like to believe. My wife was a principal. I like to believe if there was a teacher in her class that was brutally attacked by her insane ex-husband, that they would not prevent a fundraising effort from happening on school because of it's her fault for allowing this to happen or some crazy shit like that.
Right. I think at this point in time, I agree with you. Although it's interesting how I mean I think there's just very briefly like two ways you could think about that. Like, one of them is just like the idea of doing any kind of charitable fundraiser at a school would be surprising to me nowadays.
That is actually fair. This kind of jumps ahead. I want to talk about how we talk about resonance with these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do want to wait until we get to the Jamboree itself. But
yeah,
I think this leads into what my overarching point about this whole thing is going to be.
Yeah. Let's get back to it when we get there.
Okay. Then. Yeah. So one thing we've seen a few times from the People book is how flawed this is from a plot perspective, that Jake should just shoot Oswald in the face. We talked about this just a few minutes ago. We talked about this a few times. But I want to like to revisit that conversation briefly. I want to look at this as King kind of thinking about people having that idea, that general idea of like, why doesn't he just kill this guy? Everything would just be so much easier if he just kills this guy. And Jake says here, that was a strange June. On the one hand, I was delighted to be rehearsing with the troupe that had put on the original Jamboree. It was deja vu of the best kind. On the other hand, I found myself wondering with greater and greater frequency if I had ever intended to strike Lee Harvey Oswald from history's equation in the first place. I couldn't believe I lacked the guts to do it. I had already killed one bad man, and in cold blood. But it was an undeniable fact that I'd had Oswald in my sights and let him go. I told myself it was the uncertainty principle and not the fact of his family. But I kept seeing Marina smiling and holding her hands out in front of her belly. I kept wondering if he might not be a patsy after all. I reminded myself he'd be back in October, and then, of course, I asked myself how that would change things. His wife would still be pregnant, and the window of uncertainty would still be open. So this is just to say that I do think the book, Matt, is giving lip service to these thoughts of just fucking shoot the guy, just do it, and I think it constantly addresses them. And I don't think it's coming from a place of like King is defending his work and like imagining people's complaints with the structure of the plot, but rather it's just very important for us to understand why Jake is this way. And like he doesn't want to kill people. And it's easy to forget that when you are reading a book that it's like actually really hard to kill people.
Yeah.
Right? Like we talked about this a couple weeks ago, I think, but like it's super difficult to kill people. And the book just constantly reinforces that idea.
Yeah, I mean that like Jake might be like the best hero. While I'm complimenting this book overall, like he might be just like the best hero in any King book too. And what I mean by that specifically is like he's not Roland, where
Mm-hmm.
like Roland would just shoot Oswald
Yeah.
immediately and just be like, yeah, maybe he didn't do it. I don't know. He probably did. and and there's other heroic characters who are much more flawed and complex and fun in their own way. But like Jake, he's like an Atticus Finch. Like he's like, I want to do what's right. I'm always going to do. I'm like going to do my very best to do what's right. And even though the stakes are enormous, and there is sort of an easy way out here, I'm not going to take the easy way out. I'm going to do it the right way, where I'm sure. And we know that he's not just being a chicken shit because he did shoot Dunning after he proved it to his satisfaction, which I think is an important plot point. Because otherwise, if that hadn't happened, we'd be wondering in the back of our mind, like, is he just making excuses because he is a coward and he doesn't intend to do it? And it's like, no, I think we can sort of, I think we can brush that aside. Basically, like it's not that he's incapable of it; it's that he genuinely has a question of justice in his mind.
Yeah. He has a code, he has a line, and he just is not willing to budge on it at all.
Yeah.
Until he has achieved his satisfaction. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the day of the Jamboree comes, and it's as wonderful as the first one was. The grand finale is, of course, more swing dancing, Matt, but this time it's Mike and Bobby Jill. And here we go. This is what I wanted to talk about here, Matt. This is where I think the idea of resonance comes full swing for me. Let's read this text and then we'll talk about it a little bit. It's all of a piece, I thought. It's an echo so close to perfect you can't tell which one is the living voice and which is the ghost voice returning. For a moment, everything was clear. And when that happens, you see that the world is barely there at all. Don't we all secretly know this? It's a perfectly balanced mechanism of shouts and echoes pretending to be wheels and cogs. A dream clock chiming beneath a mystery glass we call life. Behind it, below it, and around it, chaos, storms, men with hammers, men with knives, men with guns, women who twist what they cannot dominate and belittle what they cannot understand. A universe of horror and loss surrounding a single lighted stage where mortals dance in defiance of the dark. So this was beautiful. Like, I loved reading this. I think it's beautifully stated. I love the idea of shouts and echoes, pretending to be wheels and cogs. And that, but Matt, what it did is got me thinking about this idea of resonance and the idea, like, I think just the fact that it used echoes here, and obviously this is an echo. This is an echo of he and Sadie dancing, but this is also an echo of Richie and Bev dancing, an echo of things that happen. And what I think we're perhaps doing with the resonance of the past, and this is why, talking about how different is 2011 from 1963 actually, like, clued this into me, is the idea that that all the stuff we surround ourselves with is like the idea of echoes as cogs, as this understanding or this thinking that everything is connected in this big mechanism, but when really it's just an illusion. It's just things bouncing against the chaos. It's just people on stage dancing against the dark. This idea that perhaps at the center of everything there's only one story, and that story is just light versus darkness, and we're seeing the resonance of that ongoing battle everywhere, constantly, in everything, in the simplest items, the simplest moments of beauty, and also the most horrible moments of violence and destruction. Why do these things seem similar? Because they're all part of the same song, if we're gonna truly channel Mr. Tolkien there. I don't know, this really unlocked for me this week, and I don't even know if I'm convinced it was necessarily entirely intentional, but it just makes it all make sense in a way that I don't think I fully ever thought about before. And I'm curious what you think about this whole thing.
I love it. I mean, I agree with you that it's incredibly beautifully written. And it makes me think about how much of this book is actually scenes of people dancing that are
Yeah.
similarly
Mm-hmm.
beautifully written. I mean, it happens many times actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, he keeps returning to it because I think this is a theme that he wants to hammer in. Yeah, I like this a lot because it's a much more mystical, um, I don't know, beautiful way of articulating this idea than like I tend to be analytical just in general,
Mm-hmm.
and so it kind of helps me to be nudged with this sort of poetic, like I think poetic and mystical are two words that come to mind, where it's I'm shaking off all of my like, yes, it is the prim and gan and the forces of and it's like, no, it's a dance, it's a dream song,
Yeah.
it's shouts and echoes across the expanse underneath the you know the there's this poetic imagery of balanced mechanisms of shouts and echoes and a dream clock and a glass, what is behind the glass, and it's like it paints this image in your mind where it's obviously not meant to be taken literally. It's a feeling, right? It's a
Yeah.
feeling that he's downloading into you, and it stays with you, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's like what ultimately what being a time traveler does in at least in the concept of this book is maybe peels back the curtain a little bit. Maybe you see and understand the overarching mechanisms of the universe a little bit more, that these echoes that exist all around us and that perhaps always exist all around us, and indeed through King's writing and the concepts of Ka and these just these literary concepts that he used of relation and things, exist constantly all around us. But it's not until you kind of go back in time and are viewing the past as an outside observer that you start to see the ways. I mean, like that's just generally true, right? Like when we without traveling back through time, when we look back through time, we talk about this concept of how the past repeats itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can see recurring events, recurring ideas, recurring things happening over and over again. I think the perfect relation with this is the Kennedy assassination and the Lincoln assassination, right? And like you can read all those crazy conspiracy things about these two assassinations and like the weird similarities that occur for with each of them,
Mm-hmm.
and just like the way in which it harmonizes the way in which these things seem to play similar tones, similar notes, similar songs. Like this is something that I think just exists in general, and perhaps what we're doing with all this harmonization within the concept of this book is just when you are looking at the past in this way, when you are living in the past, as the section of the book says it, you just notice this stuff more often. You're
Mm-hmm.
just more aware of it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the idea of history repeating itself. I think that's exactly this is something that's being tied into here, and I think it's specifically the idea that history repeats itself because human nature sort of dooms us to repeat ourselves. Like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
we're going to make the same mistakes in the same situations over and over, even if we know even if we know that this went wrong in exactly this way the last 5 times this happened. We can't escape our natures. We're these predictable cursed beings. Very often the theme comes up in context of addiction because you've got characters who are in the cycle of addiction or some other sort of character flaw where
Yeah.
they can even know, like they can have full awareness of the nature of their own the trap that they're in, or Roland being caught in the wheel of Ka, where it's like he does keep making the same choices throughout that entire series, right?
Mm-hmm.
He can't help himself.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I love connecting that explicitly to the idea of history repeating itself and how that's what we're speaking to in this book.
Yeah, me too. I was so like content when I kind of finally constructed this idea in my head that I was like, oh, I don't even know if this is textually right anymore, but it opens up the book and makes what is a beautiful book even more profound to me. So
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah, me too.
So Jake goes up on stage to thank them all on behalf of Sadie, and that's when suddenly, Matt, she's there. She's wearing her red dress, and she's absolutely beautiful. I just like, we get analytical with this book sometimes, and it's kind of our job, but like this book has like 1,000 small moments of bravery, of love, of beauty that just completely take your breath away. And this is one of those moments for me when I was just like, I just had to sit back and just be like, I love this. I just love, and it's for the most simplest reason ever, that you're seeing good people be happy. A person you love do something incredibly brave, and being honored for it, and not being punished for it. And just, man, I love this book.
Yeah, I agree. Like we fall into these, nitty gritty analytic discussions, and I think sometimes are at the risk of missing out on just noting, like, hey, this was an extremely heartwarming moment. This really touched me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have much analytical to say about it other than I felt it. It worked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is the type of thing that, like, this is the payoff of all the analytical stuff we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you can do a thing like this, you can pull off a moment like this if you've taken the time to do all the other stuff really good. And I think King is very, very good at that, and he succeeds once again. Like, he's got us, and he knows he's got us, and he makes it work.
Yep.
All right. So we learn here that Ellie told Sadie to stop feeling sorry for herself, and that she needs to go on living her life, and it works, and she does. And their relationship here is reignited once again. And in the clarity of post coitus, Jake realizes that the solution to his other moment of uncertainty was De Morenschildt involved in the assassination attempt on Walker. The easiest solution is just to ask him.
Uh-huh. It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, Jake should attempt clarity more often. Although
I don't think he's having any issues in the clarity department. I think one thing Jake has plenty of is clarity and pound cake.
That's true.
Sure.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah.
But before he does that, he also needs some clarity on his situation with Sadie. So he decides to kind of dangle some truth in front of her here, asking her that if hypothetically there was some place that she could go where the technology was better and they had an ability to make her face better, if she would want to go. And that's when the truth finally comes out, Matt. That's when Sadie perhaps pieces everything together, or, as you argued last week, had kind of already pieced everything together and just comes out and says it, because that's when she just asks him and says, "Are you from the future?" And he says yes.
Yeah.
And so in the end, like, he doesn't have to tell her the truth. She just guesses it. So you were right there, Matt.
Yeah. Right. I felt satisfied by this moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Jake basically tells her everything in this moment, Matt. Not just that he's from the future, not just where in the future, and I guess when in the future he's from, but what he's here to do. He tells her that someone's going to assassinate the president, and he's here to stop it, which is dangerous, right? Dangerous?
Yeah, this is way riskier than I thought he was going to go. Like, at this point, you have to ask, is this even going to help? Like, he's already removed the broom from the bed, I think. I think we even established that previously, mm-hmm. that she feels like he has included her in his life, even though he's not telling her the risky bits. But now he's like fully bringing her in on the schemes, and it kind of escalates from here. He brings her in on his gambling schemes.
Yeah.
Which are really like the most dangerous. I mean, other than having to stop Oswald, is like the most dangerous part of the thing, mm-hmm. is the gambling. And God, that made me nervous as hell when he takes her. I know we're skipping ahead, but when he takes her to the boxing match, I was like, oh, this is a horrible idea.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing. This is the worst idea he's ever had.
Yeah. Not only are we going to bet on this, bet very specifically on this incredibly surprising upset, but then we're gonna be there.
Yeah, we're gonna
with the gangster who's just right there, a couple rows ahead of me.
Yeah, with her, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. You're totally right. So, but Sadie, I guess to her credit, Matt, like, basically believes Jake right away. But again, I think to your point that makes sense, since she basically pieced this thing together before. But I think the part that I got just a a little bit of enjoyment out of here, Matt, is I think you said something like last week or the week before is like, yeah, no, it would actually be stupid to just be like, I can convince you with sports results. And that is essentially what happens here is like she basically believes him, but he's also like, I'll prove it. I can give you something that's not like, what happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis, but I know who's going to win this boxing match. And she's like, okay, I guess we'll just wait till that happens then.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I did think that was pretty funny, to be honest. I think the context of it falls a little bit differently because now they just have a lot more trust established.
Yeah.
Where I think it would have felt really off in that previous moment, whereas in this moment it just feels like she almost would have believed him even if he didn't have this kind of proof. But
yeah, I mean, she says she believes him anyway, right? I think it's just like she doesn't. She says I believe you, and she doesn't like leave him or turn him into the authorities or anything like that. So it is just kind of. I think it serves almost as this kind of like beautiful capper on the broom being removed.
yeah.
I think it's just like I will officially no longer see this broom the second that he wins in the fifth, and
Yeah.
we know.
And I mean, I think by bringing her directly into the schemes and having her go to the boxing match, it's sort of like he's bringing her in on the mission in a very real way. Not just telling her about it, but like I wouldn't be surprised if in fact, now that this occurs to me, it seems obvious that like he's totally incapacitated now, right? Like at the end of this week's reading, he'll probably have to ask her to do some, Oswald related things.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think that's a fair guess for sure. I mean, I do think it's interesting the ways in which like he wants to bring her in. Like I think we're jumping ahead again a little bit here, but like he compares this to being near the teeth of a dangerous machine, right? And then it's like, and so she's like, I want to help, and he's like, no, you can't really help. And like he tells her who he's here to save, but like he won't go so as far as to say like, oh, but it's going to be at the book depository, right? Like he's kind of trying to give her information without giving her too much, and I think that's impractical. Like once you've involved her, and like you can't like cherry pick the things you want to tell her and don't want to tell her. So I think it's a fair guess to say like the results of the beating that happens at the end of the story, like she's going to just like physically have to be involved in somehow.
I mean, she may be she may be the one to insist, right? Like, look, like we need to save President Kennedy. You tell me what I need to do, or like I'm just gonna go start doing things.
And I think you're right. So we leave this part, and this is where we get the wonderful reintroduction of the Frati family. Jake needs money. He needs to pay for surgeries. His funds are running low, and he decides he's going to make another bet on this prize fight coming up. He doesn't want to go to Dallas, so he goes to Fort Worth instead, where he finds a familiar name. It's a different Frati brother. It's I forget what his name was. What is it? Frank.
Yeah.
It's Frank Frati in Fort Worth. Not Chaz Frati in Derry. It's different. He's different.
It's different, but the resonances are really resonating.
Yeah. But he just goes, huh, yeah, of course it is. And then just carries on with it anyway. I know we've broken record here. And obviously you know why I've been like hitting this beat over and over again for a while now, perhaps hitting it too much to where it's spoiled this eventual outcome for you. But I think to my credit, I think King is hitting this beat as well. Like walking into a bookie and being like, I'm going to pick the underdog to win, and here's a lot of money on him. And then the bookie's like, all right, here's your odds on that. It's like, oh, those odds aren't too good. What about if he knocks the other guy out in the 5th round? And you just get more and more specific to drive your odds up. That makes people suspicious. Especially when you suddenly win. So not only did you pick the massive underdog, but you were specific in which the manner in which the underdog would win, especially in the world of boxing. They're immediately like, oh, there's a fix, about the fix. Like, it's just like that is the conclusion that every single human being on the planet would jump to.
Yeah.
Because you just don't do that. And I love the way in which I forget the gangster's name, but basically dismantles this whole argument. It's like, it was just, a spur of the moment bet. It's like people don't bet $1,000 at the
Right.
spur of the moment.
Yeah, it's on like the weirdest possible scenario, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great. That's honestly like, it feels, somewhat perverse to say this, but when the gangster finally gets Jake, a lot of the things he's saying to him are like kind of the things that you and I have been saying, over the last few weeks, where it's like, yeah, Jake.
Yeah. Oh, really? Your insanely clever idea to purposefully lose some bets was immediately sniffed out by this gangster?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never could have seen that coming.
Yeah. The gangster couldn't have ever noticed that you were still way ahead, even though you lost a few bets here and there.
Yeah, I just imagining him coming in and making like dollar bets that he loses, and then
yeah,
randomly coming in and making a $2,000 bet that he hits big on, and be like, "Ah, yes, I have disguised myself perfectly."
Yeah, and like grinning while he does this. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just we've already talked about why this is this way and what the device this is working in the book, but I continue to find this absolutely hilarious that this is happening. It's just great. I just like, he even says like, oh yeah, last time the last frati turned a person on me that led me into a whole bunch of trouble, but
yeah. Right. I mean, once again, it's not like I'm mad at the book due to how implausibly stupid he's being, because in this scenario, it literally is like he needs this money to pay for these massive medical bills.
Yep.
He's running out of money. His schedule at this point is like all this like driving around trying to obfuscate his movements and spy on various people and plan this thing with Morenschildt and take care of Sadie while doing all of this, and it's like, yeah, he can't be perfect. He's not actually a secret agent, despite the fact that he foolishly behaves like he is.
And this is it. This is the last bit of sports related foreknowledge he has. Mm-hmm. Like this is the end of Al's notebook on sports betting section is this one little piece that I think Al didn't even himself get to, right? Like, I think the way it's written is like, Al just looked this up on the internet and we're trusting this. Mm-hmm. And because Al never made it to this time period actually. And so we have no confirmation on this. And so like, it's kind of a now or never situation. This is the last chance I have to get money. And so he just needs to find a bookie as quickly as possible. It's fratty. And instead of seeing the danger in the resonance this time, he sees it as just like, oh yeah, here we go. This is just another echo. And he goes through with it. And
I do have to say that like adding this feeling of uncertainty around like, wait a minute, like, is this, first of all, like, is this actually a valid piece of foreknowledge, or is there, was there a game of telephone with the nature of the bet and he's going to lose the money? Mm-hmm. Or also, like, it occurred to me, like, what implications does it have for Sadie's trust in him?
Oh gosh, yeah.
If he were to lose here, and like, it's also possible, he's been in the past for what, like 5 years now.
Yeah.
Like, just normal shit, like just the accrual of little nudges that he's given the timeline could, at this point, change the outcome of a fight, right? Like, boxing is this incredibly precise sport, right? You can imagine a guy barely dodging a blow that he wouldn't have dodged otherwise because, a car crossed in front of him slightly differently that morning or whatever. So like, you can just imagine, like, at a certain point, the sports bets stop working. And maybe, and like, I just thought that would be an amazing, like, game changer moment in the story to sort of lampshade or more than that, just like directly show like, now your footing is uncertain. You can no longer rely on these things that you thought you knew. But no, we didn't go that way. I'm just saying it was a thought that crossed my mind. It actually made me very tense. I was so caught up in the drama of this fight, because I was like, God, I really like this. Really needs to work out for so many reasons, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think the book plays up that drama for sure, and
Yeah,
like because we basically get to see like a beat by beat of the fight almost, and I think the only reason that would functionally work in the story is if we weren't 100% sure what the outcome was going to be.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But before he places the bet, Jake starts on Operation pretend to be a CIA agent and contact George De Morenschildt. So he starts this operation out by spying on the guy. He heads to his home and basically learns that Morenschildt is just the worst kind of bullshit artist possible. Like he sees a sign in front of his house that indicates he's a conservative, and basically, and this is actually true, Matt. The guy was an outspoken conservative. Basically, all the ideals espoused by General Walker are things that Morenschildt himself supported and believed in, and so like basically everything he's been saying to Lee Harvey Oswald, as we suspected, is complete bullshit. That he's just leading him on. He's just placating him, and then the question becomes why.
yeah,
We asked this last week, but even more than ever, even now knowing that he doesn't even believe an ounce of the things that he's saying to Lee,
yeah,
why?
yeah. Um, and I mean, I think that the text offers us a solution, which is like he
Uh-huh.
just likes to fuck with people,
Yeah.
which I I think I can buy. Like, I don't know that I'm just like, oh yeah, that's definitely it. Like, there's always the opportunity or the possibility that there's some deeper, more conspiratorial angle to it. But
Mhm.
I think the way the book constructs the situation, I'm willing to just accept that. Yeah, like maybe this is just this asshole likes to screw with people,
Sure.
and this is fun for him, and that's all. That's all it is.
But he was a CIA informant though, Matt.
Yeah, like that's the thing. He was a CIA informant, and so you can never just be like, oh well, yep, all wrapped up in a nice little package. He's just a jerk. He's just a jerk. I mean, yeah, like this is the problem. Like, there's one degree of separation between, cadre of remorseless killers who probably wanted Kennedy dead, which is the CIA, and man who shot Kennedy, which is
Uh-huh.
Oswald. And that one degree of separation is, of course, De Morenschildt. Um, but also, the man who shot Kennedy had deep ties to a very powerful foreign government that probably also wanted Kennedy dead. So, like, the problem with Kennedy assassination conspiracy theorizing is actually that everybody wanted Kennedy dead, and it's like a whodunit where everybody on the train has a motive.
Yeah.
That's what
Uh-huh.
makes it hard. There's too many red herrings. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know. I don't have a conclusion for you here. It's just, it's one of those, like, there's so many. It's yeah. I mean, it's like you go back to the every historical assassination, from Archduke Ferdinand to Lincoln to Kennedy. There's all these like weird coincidences, and it's like, are those coincidences, or is shit just random? And like that's what any event would look like if you picked over it with a microscope, the way that we do over these consequential events.
Yeah, especially when you're specifically looking for coincidences.
Yeah.
Like when you're setting out to look at something to find some deeper meaning or reason for it, you you find stuff. Of
Mm-hmm.
course you do. You always find stuff because life is weird and random, and it resonates in ways sometimes that are just like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't studied this stuff enough to actually have an informed opinion of myself. I think probably just like a crazy kid who wanted to be important and had a gun, saw an opportunity to do so. Like I believe that happens all the time,
Yeah.
like everywhere, constantly, and probably just happened here. Like I think that's probably like that seems like the simplest, easiest explanation for this whole thing. But I don't fucking know,
Yeah.
man. But I just I think it is pretty fascinating, but I just think this is a result of picking anything over with a fine tooth
Right.
comb. You're just gonna find stuff that makes you go, huh?
Totally. And the unfortunate truth is that if you were to pick up a book about how it was definitely the Freemasons who killed Kennedy, um, you or I or anyone, if you pick up that book, there's a good chance you'll find it persuasive,
Yeah.
because you take any position and you offer only, you cherry pick and present in the best possible form only the arguments in favor, and you just kind of don't mention the arguments against, or
Yeah.
or the contradictory evidence. We're simply not smart enough to puzzle this. So like, I think this is, I don't even blame people who get sucked into conspiracy thinking, because that's how the whole world is. Like, you're constantly at the
Yeah.
mercy of like the sources of information, and if you happen to pick up the wrong book, um, that's going to anchor you in a way that's very, very difficult to resist.
Yeah,
So,
man. I was 20 when I saw Loose Change, the 9/11 conspiracy
uh-huh.
documentary. I remember watching that and being like, "Oh, wow."
Yeah.
And then you take 10 minutes
Uh-huh.
after that and look at the arguments against it, and you're like, "Hey, wait a minute."
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, I fully believe that happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm a crank about a couple of things, right? And that's
Mhm.
fine. I've learned to just have an attitude of live and let live about it. Actually, like, okay, that's your thing. All right, I'm really into ancient civilizations that have disappeared.
Yeah,
There you
yeah.
go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty harmless, it broadly, to think that there's some vast conspiracy with Kennedy's assassination. Like, I think there are much more real and present and dangerous conspiracy theories than that.
Yeah,
Generally. So if you believe it, the CIA killed Kennedy, sure,
yeah.
sure.
Well,
I mean, I will say that has like pretty fucking dire implications for us as a nation. But on the other hand, the CIA kills a lot of
yeah,
people all the time.
right. Let's not get it twisted here, because a lot of terrifying conspiracies are true. Um, the all these like weird things the CIA and FBI gets up to and then like hides later.
Mhm.
And then it's the meme where it's like every 5 years the government declassifies something from 50 years ago, and it's just like, yeah, we did it, what are you going to do about it? That's like
Yeah.
basically true.
Mhm.
So you can't just be like all conspiracies are wrong. It's like, no, they're not. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fun to get, kind of fun to think about, because it's this event that's distant enough from us that it's abstract. But
Yeah.
I like, yeah, anyway. I don't know. I don't have a dog in this.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Chapter 25. By the way, the longest chapter of all the chapters that we've talked about this week. We are 2 hours into the podcast. Just one
Great.
more 40-page chapter to go.
Okay.
Um, I think we've jumped around a lot and we've covered a lot of the stuff already, so I think we'll move through it pretty fast. But
Yeah.
chapter 25 begins with one of Sadie's first of many reconstructive surgeries, or at least that's the plan. We see by the end of the surgery that Jake's mind is pretty made up. No matter what happens, he's taking Sadie back to 2011 with him. We've already gotten your opinion on the likelihood of that actually happening.
Yeah.
But from here, we move on to George Amberson calling George De Morenschildt on the phone and beginning his gambit with him. Jake plays off of Morenschildt's greed for some Cuban oil leases and gets to agree to meet to him later that night to prove he had nothing to do with the assassination attempt. He disguises himself and meets up on Mercedes Street. And Matt, I really love this part, actually. I love seeing how Jake kind of handles De Morenschildt. Like, it almost feels like he's channeling a different person here. This is what I kind of mean by perhaps seeing Jake's character shift a little bit here, because he does a really good job actually here of like completely emotionally attacking this man and getting him to do exactly what he wants, which is not something he has a lot of training in, actually, but like he really does a good job,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, we've seen him become steadily more ruthless and cold
Mhm.
over the course of the story. I think we see a lot of that in this chapter in particular. He obviously got his first real taste of horrible violence and consequences when he got involved in saving the Dunning family. And
Mhm.
I think more recently, watching the aftermath of this horrible violent event that happened with Sadie, um, has hardened him and kind of escalated things even more. Also, he's just incredibly stressed, as we've said. So I think overall, all this adds up to just make him a lot more cold and
Yeah.
kind of dark, actually.
Yeah. So Jake requests proof that George couldn't have been around the night of the Walker assassination, and he provides it, a snippet from the paper that shows George and his wife were out on the town that night having drinks with Jack Ruby? What?
It's such a bizarre and inexplicable tidbit that it must be a historical fact.
I actually tried to look this up,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't see it definitively that like there was an article that says yes, De Morenschildt and Ruby in the months leading up to the Kennedy assassination had drinks together at a club. Um, but I think it's probably a thing that actually happened because this is just the way things work. For those that maybe have forgotten, Jack Ruby is the man that assassinates Lee Harvey Oswald after the Kennedy assassination. So if there's some grand conspiracy, then he's the one that was paid to take out the other guy, as you
Right.
do.
As you do. Take out the patsy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. um, again, like, King has kind of steered clear of the conspiracy theory stuff really up until this point. I think he's really leaning heavily into it these past few chapters, and it's because we're getting closer and closer to the event itself. And again, I think it's ultimately, Matt, I think the end of this scene is Jake basically concluding that what you talked about before, that De Morenschildt is just a piece of shit that gets his rocks off of fucking with people, and Jake basically concludes that, right? He's like, no, he doesn't have any, like, since he's pretending to be a CIA agent and De Morenschildt doesn't go, well, you're the one that told me to reach out to him. He basically concludes that, oh, this guy was just doing it for kicks. And so it's interesting that we do kind of bring this conspiracy theory stuff into it, but at least at this point, the book's conclusion, all this stuff is no, De Morenschildt was not operating on CIA orders to contact Lee Harvey Oswald. He just did it because he's a fucking monster asshole that enjoys fucking with people and thought it would be fun to fuck with this kid. And that's kind of where we leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt satisfied by sort of the way it plays out. Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Jake takes Sadie home from the hospital, and we see that she's decided she'll be following Jake back to the future. And this is that where we get that is it very different line that we loved so much. People pay more for gasoline and have more buttons to push. Otherwise, it's about the same.
Yeah. No.
No.
No, I mean, just I agree with you. This is supposed to stick out to us like a nail. Just like, are you insane? Like this is the opposite of the first 100 pages of this book.
Yeah. We like even again, even if like exterior to the novel, we doubt the truth of that fact. I think we can just look at the novel itself. We don't have to go anywhere other than the text to point out the flaw in this statement. It's all here in the book itself.
Yep.
So August and Jody, Matt, is a time of peace and happiness for Jake and Sadie, for JD, as you called them inadvertently, but now it's just going to be what they're called.
Now that's it.
I did want to point out this thing though. They're watching TV. They spend a lot of time reading together and watching TV together, and it's this beautiful, wonderful thing. And then I like this. One night she tuned to the new adventure of Ellery Queen, but I asked her to change the channel. I don't like mysteries, I said. Now, I don't even know if you remember this because, we were reading this book so slowly and it was like literally a month and a half ago. But the new adventures of Ellery Queen is the program that was playing the night of the horrible Dunning murders. That is kind of the association that Jake has from it.
I did not remember that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the interesting part about that is like throughout all of this, like the Dunning stuff is still weighing pretty heavily on him. Like he stopped it, right? He fixed it. It didn't happen, but like it's still affecting him. It's still in his head. It's still something he thinks about. And I just thought that was worth pointing out here that, he's got all these ideas about like what he needs to do and what he's going to have to do. They're all swirling around in his head. And with that is still the thing that he did back in Derry all those years ago.
I really love that touch. I mean, despite the fact that it went right by me, I think that's a beautiful touch there. Yeah.
Well, I think if you had been reading this book like a normal human being, you would not have gone right by. You would have just been like, oh yeah, that's the television program that I read about 3 days ago because I'm reading this book at a normal pace.
Yeah. It also just kind of reminds us that he did do a lot of shit that he hasn't told her, which, not that I'm saying like, oh, he has to tell her. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
he did not tell her anything about that whole interlude at all.
That's true.
So.
So yeah, they're living at peace that is, until the school board attempts to interrupt it. Jake is stopped in the grocery store by a Ms. Jessica Caltrop, asking if he's living in sin with Sadie. And Matt, look, Jessica Caltrop should be named Karen Caltrop. She's a Karen. Apologies to all the Karens out there listening. You're wonderful people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that your name has been forever marred by pop culture, but and I want to be clear here. Fuck her. I hate her. She's stupid and getting in everyone's business. She's awful. I hate it. This whole section induces a rage in me that I think also takes place in Jake. But what I want to talk about here, Matt, is the ways in which Jake goes kind of crazy here, actually.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think this is yet more of his like culminating coldness and darkness that we've seen, which again I ascribe mainly to the stress that he's been under. He's basically Spider-Man at this point. We're just like everything just ratcheting harder and harder in his life. And I think he's kind of starting to break.
Yeah. We didn't talk about it, but like he definitely like took pleasure in fucking with De Morenschildt, right? Like he at one point in the conversation he takes out the gun and holds the gun up on him and like threatens to kill him, and like he enjoys it. And look, it's not as if that guy doesn't deserve it. Like in the context of the story, De Morenschildt was a monster. He was an asshole that just fucked with people for fun. He sucked. He's terrible. He no scruples, no morals, just a jerk, and making him scared temporarily. I'm not gonna lose sleep over that. But he took pleasure in it, and then here again, he escalates this thing with this woman who is a jerk. Like, she's awful, but now I had her pinned against the brick wall. She was looking up at me, her eyes bright with terror. In another time and place, I could have felt sorry for her. Not now. She says, "You're disgusting," when he reveals that he knows about her child that she had. She says, "You're disgusting." And he says, "True." And it's sometimes such a pleasure. Like he is enjoying this. And it's like, oh man, like I'm sorry, I can't see a man like a tall man, like a 6'4" man, like pushing a woman up against a wall and feel like good about it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Even if she deserves to be yelled at and scolded and diminished in some way, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the situation sort of starts out with a tinge of satisfaction because you're like, yeah, like she deserves this, and then, I mean, I think he clearly pushes it past the point of like, whoa, like if even if you're just being pragmatic about this, you're like, Jake, if anybody sees this, you're gonna get like this does not look good. Even if we, the reader, feel like she deserves this, there's no way that people are going to be like, that was fine. That was fine that he did that.
Mm-hmm. And this is like, I think you're right that this is a reflection of his increasing anxiety and tension. And I think this Spider-Man comparison is very, very apt. But I can't help but like be worried about it, like that, like he's getting himself in this situation where who is he turning into? And like one of the constant refrains from Sadie is like, I'm going to support you in this as long as I know that like you're not doing this for hatred, that like you're only doing what's necessary. Like, and we have these moments that make me go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you screaming at a woman in a grocery store? I don't know, man. That makes you not so heroic in my book.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we just talked for a bit about how he's like the best hero, right? He's like this highly moral, highly upstanding hero. And it's like, there's definitely this, this week's reading, this chapter and the previous chapter have these distinct moments where he takes a little bit more pleasure in being aggressive. than he's ever shown before. And I mean, maybe it's not as simple as just like, well, his life has gotten real stressful. Maybe we're saying something else with it. That seems like the most obvious kind of explanation to me, though.
Yeah, I do think personally part of it, at least with this Jessica Caltrop part of it, is I think he's fucking sick and tired of 1963.
Hmm.
I really think that's part of it. You know, I think this is nearing the end of his time here, and the social and moral uh, idiocies of the time period are starting to wear on him, and he is just like he's in love with this woman, like the idea that um what they're doing is wrong in any way and that would damage their reputation in the town is exhausting to him to the point of rage, and he's now so we're seeing some of that spill out here.
I agree. I think you're right. I mean, it's the specific thing that he's angry at, right? He's angry at her
Yeah.
prudishness and her default moralizing attitude and her superiority.
Hmm.
I love that her name is Caltrop. I mean, you kind of, because like it's like a, just for those who might not know, like those are the spiked things that you throw on the road to puncture tires, or in the old days you throw on the ground to stop your enemies and they step on them and they're like it's underfoot and impeding your progress, and that's
Yeah.
what she is to him right now.
Hmm.
She is a caltrop, and he's sick of that shit, right?
Hmm.
He's sick of stepping on these pointy, you know, irritants everywhere that he goes, and not just him. I think if it was just him, he might be able to shrug it off, but it's Sadie, and he feels for her, and it doesn't just enrage him that they're putting this on him, and it enrages him that they're putting it on her.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So he heads back, and at a dirty weekend in Candlewood, Jake and Sadie finally chat again about what's he's doing here. Sadie says she wants to help, but Jake thinks, as we said, he's close to a big machine filled with sharp teeth, like some sort of mangler.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I love this part, Matt. It says, "I don't want you to be hurt. I already have been," she said quietly. "Are you asking if that was my fault?" "No, honey." She put a hand on my cheek. "No." Which is an interesting thought, though, right? Like, I don't think Sadie actually believes it, obviously, and but but maybe, right? I mean, George Amberson certainly didn't drive John Clayton to be here, but we do have to wonder, when we talked about this previously, would the obdurate past have sent John Clayton on April 10th if um if Jake wasn't planning on doing something specific to gain some information and learn about Harvey Oswald and everything there, right? Like this there was a reason why these things happened at the same time, and then furthermore, like if he had never come at all, like would John Clayton have come at all either? Like I think Sadie here says, you know, if it wouldn't you, it would have been another man, and this would have happened, and it had nothing to do with you. And she could be right there. She could. We don't know for sure. I think another fun wrinkle of this whole thing is, you know, we talked about how he is the best possible person to bring her out of this, possibly.
Mhm.
So if this does occur to her, regardless of Jake's presence, what does her recovery from it look like? How is he changing how she recovers from it? Just food for thought.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I keep thinking of the parable that we mentioned a week or two ago, where it's like, for every good impact that Jake has, you kind of have to be like, well, we'll see,
Hmm.
because there could be some subsequent negative impact that is unanticipated and unintended.
Yeah.
But then again, for every negative impact he has, there could be an unanticipated positive impact. Like, you just can't know. You just kind of do your best, and life is just a bunch of stuff that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life is dancing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely, I don't know. Part of me just wants to wait to see how the book ends to decide, like, where do we come down on that question thematically. um
Yeah.
I wouldn't even mind if we just kind of leave it up in the air, because I feel like that's more true to the spirit of the parable, is like, no, it never comes down. You never know.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
you just have to do what you think is best.
Sure. Sure. I like that. So Jake takes Sadie to the big fight, the case tiger fight. I love Matt, though. I think that the fight itself is wonderfully written, and we talked about that already. Like we kind of see the play by play and how the tension of not knowing for sure. But I also love how, like, this is not just the fight. It isn't just Jake proving something to Sadie here. I think this is King once again saying something about the nature of humanity and how that ties into what we're doing with the story. Because look at how Sadie describes the fight after the fact. She says, "That was pure bloodlust, and I was up on my feet cheering with the rest. For a few seconds, maybe even a full minute, I wanted Case to kill that dancing all full of himself dandy. Then I couldn't wait to get back here and jump into bed with you. That wasn't about love just now, Jake. That was about burning." And so we see this, like, this this animalistic, like, kind of darkness that is present in humanity that she
Mhm.
witnesses here in this fight.
Yeah, it's that low Kamala stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I think that's one interesting thing, like you can say about the Jake Sadie relationship, is that it has been so consistently like the beautiful, um, um, red love.
sure.
I don't know that we've talked about this a single time in this book. Shame on us. But yeah, I think theirs has always been the red love, the
Mm,
the 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 love of the mind, almost like a spiritual connection. Not that they haven't also had sex a lot, but it has all been like this like beautiful sort of like life affirming sex. And
yeah,
here it's like, yeah, they're human. There's no real like terrible implications here. It's just yeah, it's tied in with sex is tied in with violence, and there's this whole other axis here.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But she says that she's worried, perhaps, that the reason Jake is killing Oswald is coming from hate. Is coming from the same kind of idea, the same kind of bloodlust and animalistic energy that she saw on this boxer before he knocked out the other boxer and shocked the world. And she's worried that's the case with him. And this perhaps is kind of the payoff for the one thing we've been talking about for a few weeks is King's ongoing effort to humanize Lee Harvey Oswald and show Jake struggling with the human side of him, because Jake answers her here. He says, he says to her that no, it's not hate. It's not hate motivating him, at least not entirely. He says what he feels about Lee Harvey Oswald is sorrow for a spoiled life. And I think it's very important to the functioning of the book in this moment that we believe him when he says that,
yeah,
that he's not just like, you know, tricking her or lying to her, and there is hate for this guy in his heart. I think when he says that, he means it. And I think the book has taken the time and effort to demonstrate why this is the case. I think that's what all the stuff with him struggling with who Lee Harvey Oswald is and why he is the way he is, and does he love his wife? Does he love his daughter? Maybe yes, but that doesn't forgive the things he does. But it also makes him a human being, and ultimately, I think that's what we're doing here. And so he says that line, and in that moment, we believe him.
yeah. I totally agree. I mean, I think even as recently as last week, we were saying that it's hard to imagine Jake pulling the trigger on this guy because he has humanized him so much. Because
Yep.
he has, I think Jake tries to hate him because it would make
Yeah.
his mission easier if he did, but I
hmm
don't think he can manage it fully.
I think it's actually very ironic that, like, the thing that Sadie expects of him is the one thing that makes it harder for him to go through with this, right? Like, it would certainly be a lot easier if he just hated him and
Yeah,
just wanted to kill him. But she demands more of him. She's kind of serving as his moral compass in this whole thing.
yeah, totally.
All right, so Matt, as we approach the end of the chapter, Jake heads back to Frattie's to collect his winnings, and from here, King starts slamming every single possible warning bell, deja vu, his danger sense, the harmonizing of the past. Everything is going off. Jake seems to realize he's in trouble, but not how immediate that trouble is. He gets to his house on Neely Street, and Akiva Roth is waiting with his goons there for him. And here we go, Matt. Here we go.
Yep, dough.
I love. We already talked about this a little bit, but we learn you know, that Eddie Gutierrez got syphilis and the worms in his brain created one worm in particular, and that is George Amberson, the man with the special talent to somehow win bets he was supposed to lose. This is something that Eddie couldn't get over, and so he sent the word out to everyone around the country to look out for this guy. Matt, my favorite part of this reveal is that like Akiva Roth like knew this guy was him the first time he went in there, right? Like immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And then just is like, you know, whatever. And so like to Roth, Jake's returning to Frates 3 years later to place another bet was like spitting in his face.
Yeah.
Was like, I let you go.
Yeah.
Like I like the incredulity in his voice when he says that. Like I let you go, and you had the fucking gall to come back to place another bet to do the same thing again. And like, it's so funny because Jake wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah.
At all.
Right. He was so in over his head that he actually got a break and didn't even realize it, and then just doubled down. So yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah. But this is pretty rough, Matt. They beat the absolute shit out of Jake. The demanding to know how he could possibly be aware of the fixes that must have been in all these sporting events, even baseball, which everyone knows baseball hasn't been fixed since that 1 year that it was fixed. Everyone knows that. But they beat the shit out of him, Matt. Busted knee, arm, fingers, probably ribs, also a hard kick to the head. So we got potential possibilities for brain damage there. And not looking good, Matt. Although I will say he's kind of a smartass to these gangsters in a way that makes you go, "Hey, Jake, buddy, what are you doing?"
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this, and I actually thought about it as like a writing exercise of like, how do you get a character out of a situation where the mobsters are going to torture him to death unless he gives them a specific piece of information that he doesn't have, and he can't prove that he doesn't have it. And it's like, well, you kind of have to choose option C, which is like he is a smartass, and then they just get mad and forget about asking him the questions. Because it's really hard to think of an adequate lie, right? So anyway, I don't know. I was like, I literally don't see how you get out of the scene in any other way other than him like just inviting worse pain on himself to avoid having to go through the questioning, because the questioning goes nowhere.
Sure. Why don't they just kill him?
I don't know. I mean,
besides the dualistic reason of that would be horribly detrimental to our ongoing story.
So I know nothing about how the actual mob works, but the way the mob works in fiction is they want to leave horribly battered people alive so that they can serve as a warning to not do those specific things that they don't like. For example, tricking their bookies. So that would be the reason. Like, there's a reason they just break arms and legs instead of killing people who cross them, because it's like, okay, you now are going to walk around being a billboard for not doing this.
Yeah, true. I would think someone that took you for this much money, this consistently, though, would just be like, yeah, we're just gonna we're gonna take this guy out. Like, I guess why is Eddie Gutierrez okay with just pictures of him being beaten an inch within his life and not him dead, since he's like brain rotted from syphilis and insane? Like, you figure he would just want the devil dead. Or are they just gonna lie and say this is him dead? Like, here's some pictures of him beaten up, assume that he's dead.
I don't know. I didn't think about that. I guess
I don't think this actually matters. Like, I don't know why I'm barking up this particular tree. I just think it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like if he was really the devil, could we have kicked his ass like this? Is one way that you could spin that. But
yeah, true.
For a guy who's lost his mind, it's like I don't know how persuadable he is on that count.
Yeah. But regardless, he gets the shit beaten out of him and left for dead. And now we end the chapter with him crawling for help. I think the irony we're presented with here is that the woman who chastised him for not getting involved in some domestic violence is the one that finds him and eventually is going to help him, presumably. But we leave, Matt. It is August. It is late August at this point, because I think the fight occurs on August 29th. So it's late August. We're about 3 months away from D-Day, from 11/22/63, and now our character has just been beaten to within an inch of his life. So oops.
Yeah. Well, we all knew this was coming. So I mean,
did you? I mean, like, did I telegraph this too much, or do you think the book was just telegraphing that this gangster stuff was going to catch up with him eventually?
I don't think, I mean, like you mentioned it, right? But like the book also, like every time he has any interaction with the bookies, there's a lot of sprinkled references of like, I would later come to regret this. And then you're like even if I don't remember what exactly it was that he said he would regret, I just know, like, okay, he's gonna get some horrible consequence from his gambling at some point in the future, and that, like, that's just very clear. So that's what I mean when I say not surprised.
Okay, good. I hoping I didn't completely spoil that for you. So
no.
Yeah, but that's where we leave our chapters. We're going to, I think next week, it's not the end of the book. Next week is our penultimate episode covering chapters 26 through 28. So we've got a little bit more of the book after next week, but I think we're going to have a pretty good idea next week of how this whole thing's going to wrap up, probably.
All right. Sounds good.
It's exciting. Yeah. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to President Kennedy?
He's probably going to die.
Please, Mr. Kennedy. All right, Matt. Before we go, let's talk discussion question. We skipped the question last week. Let's not skip it this week, but let's move through it as quickly as we possibly can.
Let's do it. So the question was your favorite spying on people, watching people without their knowledge, a la Rear Window-esque type story. Mm-hmm. Luigi Gamer 333 says, my favorite Rear Window-esque moment is actually a pretty recent one. 2021's The Voyeurs is a movie about a couple that moves into a loft that is directly across the street from another apartment with huge glass windows lining the outer walls. The couple becomes curious about their neighbors as they observe that the man across from them is a photographer of models that he often seduces into having sex with them, while also spending evenings with his seeming wife that comes home in the evenings. There's a series of events with an incredible twist that I won't spoil, but it is brilliant in its execution. I think the lesson in most of these stories is that if you become too obsessed with spying on your neighbors, it's not going to turn out well for you.
I like that answer. I've not seen that film, but yeah. I can I just say generally that I love this story concept, like Rear Window, this whole thing. I think there was a Shia LaBeouf one that came out, oh gosh, probably 15 years ago now, that I don't think was a very good movie, but it was basically a Rear Window remake. And I just love the concept so much that I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about, but that sounds fun. Shia LaBeouf in that role sounds really fun.
What was it called? It's gonna drive me crazy. I'll look it up while we're doing more answers and let you know by the end of the show. Yeah. But next we have Steve Living Room, who says, Stephen King likes to do a different take on the Rear Window technique. In Dreamcatcher, a person sees another person controlling them. The controlled person sees and hears all, but can't do a thing about it. Super creepy and weird. It's like a reverse Being John Malkovich, which is also creepy and brilliant. But they say, but I'll have to go back to my old standby and pick A. Bedek in the last two Hyperion books. Steve always goes back to Hyperion. Just a perfect observer character of all that goes on with Ania and Raoul's quests. I don't know how to pronounce those names. I haven't read those Hyperion books.
Yeah, I didn't read the last two. I've only read the first two so far. But
I've only read the first one.
I like the Dreamcatcher idea. I mean, I've only seen the movie, but that's like an interesting twist on this question. Not something I would have thought about, but a fun thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Disturbia, by the way, is the name of the title.
Yes, I remember Disturbia. That. Now that you say that, that's funny. No, I haven't seen it though. That's cool. Jaraxus Eridar Lord says, my favorite Rear Window bit of storytelling may or may not count since it's the entire framing device. The movie Enter the Void follows a drug dealer in Japan who, after dying in a police shootout, exits his body. He then spends the movie as a floating spirit watching the impact of his death that his death has on those around him. Due to the first-person camera making the audience watch through the eyes of the character, it doesn't cleanly fit into a Rear Window style, but it's the first thing I thought of. Cool. No, that's fun. I keep meaning to watch that movie, but I never get around to it.
Mm-hmm. Next we have Baby Can You Dig Your Sam, who says, well, here I go again. Two of my favorites have to be The Burbs and Fright Night. Both are clearly influenced by Rear Window and follow the voyeurism of people convinced that their next door neighbors are evil. The conflict in Fright Night is nobody believes Charlie, and he's acting so crazy that it's no wonder people don't believe him. In The Burbs, the conflict is whether or not the Klopeks are really bad, or if the bored suburbanites are creating drama where there is none. And you... And who could forget George McFly as a peeping Tom? Such ew.
Yeah, I forgot about that particular beat.
Isn't it? God. Isn't that so weird? Like that's just the 80s, man. That like is just like a. It's more of a demonstration of how lame he is, and not that he's a monster.
Right.
It's like it's almost specifically just like, oh, he's such a loser, and not, oh, he's awful.
Yeah, right. It's just so Marty can be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's a peeping Tom.
Yeah.
Not like, ew.
Yeah.
Dad, what the fuck?
Yeah,
what is wrong with you?
This permanently ruins my image of my father. Yeah. Busy Dad 82 says, one of my favorite instances of Rear Window type storytelling is The Wire, a show about drug dealing in Baltimore, but also about the many policy and systematic failures that put people in situations where they become victims of drugs and the war on drugs. One scene that comes to mind is around season 2, specifically when Herc and Carver are watching drug dealers near the docks. They get an expensive microphone and hide it in a tennis ball. After gaining some information, the ball is then thrown by a suspect and destroyed. To cover the cost of the microphone, they make up a funny informant with the unlikely street name of Fuzzy Dunlop and use police funds to pay for the mic under the guise of paying off the informant. Love it.
Great choice. The Wire. I love that show. Have you seen The Wire? You have, right?
No, I have not. I've even had someone buy me The Wire on DVD, and I still haven't watched it. So
we got to delete this part from the podcast, because if people learn that you also haven't seen The Wire, there's going to be riots.
It's going to be a top level Reddit post going, really?
I Reddit poster, before you get mad at both of us, I have seen The Wire. I've seen every episode of The Wire. I love The Wire, as everybody does. Very, very good TV.
Yeah. Good for you.
Friedlock68 says, my favorite Rear Window moment would be the episode of The Sopranos titled Mr. Regario's Neighborhood, where the FBI is surveilling each member of the Sopranos family as they go about their day-to-day business with the goal of planting a bug in the basement of their house in the form of a lamp. That's great. I'm not going to read more of this answer, Matt.
Okay.
Solely for the reason that I like to bait our listeners into thinking that you and I are going to do a Sopranos podcast.
Yeah. That's always good to do. All right.
No, in all seriousness, it's because I fully plan on watching The Sopranos one day, and the fact that they're going to have some voyeurism in Sopranos excites me, because I think that's a very fascinating story concept, as I said previously.
Yeah,
so that's great.
Cool. Swamp Ape Draft says, my favorite piece of Rear Windows type storytelling is the episode of The Simpsons Bart of Darkness, which directly parodies the movie, but being a kid at the time, thought it was just a fun story. Also tying in with the conversation about Lee Harvey Oswald knowledge, before this book, all my knowledge on Oswald came from the 2-part episode of Quantum Leap, where Sam Beckett jumps into Oswald's life at various points in time and gives a decent history. I think Oswald gets loose in the future or something. It's been a while. I mean, what's funny is this isn't a quite a perfect matchup, but Quantum Leap is a sort of voyeuristic concept of a show.
Sure.
Like he is active in the stories, but also he's getting this really sort of uncomfortable window into all these people's lives.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, good. Two great ones. I could quote the entire Bart of Darkness episode, beginning to end.
Can I just say I love our listeners so much that we get a Sopranos answer and the Simpsons answer back to back like
Yeah.
that? I think that's I love you guys. This is really great.
Me too.
Pear Jane says, at the risk of sounding cliche, the last scene in The Godfather. Through the doorway, Kay watches Michael's men kiss his ring, call him Don Corleone, and close the door on her. She instantly knows that not only did he kill Carlo, but whatever she suspected all along is all true. Oh, that's a good moment. That's a good moment.
Yeah.
Good movie. Good movie, Godfather. Who knew?
And a great way of ending the movie, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, Kashiku says, one of my favorite rear window types of storytelling is from 1996's Mission Impossible film. The film opens with an interrogation, but you only see what's happening through a TV monitor feed from a hidden camera. On the screen, an imposing man is chewing a cigar and pacing around another man who is seated on a chair and trying to make sense of the dead woman on the bed. A little bit of physical abuse, some threats, and a proffered name later, the cigar-chewing man makes a toast with poison vodka, then reveals himself to be Ethan Hunt, IMF agent extraordinaire. To this day, the first Mission Impossible movie is not just one of my favorite spy movies ever, but also one of the best of the franchise. Yes.
Agree.
Every few years, I rewatch that movie just thinking like, was it really as good as I remember it? And it always is.
Yes. The answer is 100 billion times yes.
It is. I think it's the best of the franchise, actually.
I agree.
Unapologetically.
Yeah.
So
I like to love all of the more modern Mission Impossible films. I think they're great fun, very enjoyable. But De Palma's Mission Impossible is incredible.
Yep.
It's so good. It's smart. It's action packed, but it's grounded in a way that they I totally am fine with Mission Impossible becoming this ridiculous stunt spectacular because it kind of sort of always was that. But I also feel like the stunts in the original Mission Impossible, while being insane, were also like much more grounded in reality.
Yeah.
It's just like he's on a train. And he's dangling in the air versus like he's holding onto an airplane as it flies into the sky.
Yeah, right. You could strain your credulity a little bit rather than having to just be like, okay, this is definitely all just pretend.
Yeah. It's also just like the plot is just very well done.
I mean, okay. Last thing, just like the final train scene, it conveys like a sense of like speed and danger and stakes and everything just far better than more modern movies that have way better technology. And I'm continually impressed by how they did that. Yeah.
And Tom Cruise is incredible in it. I mean, he's good as Ethan Hunt in all of them, but Ethan Hunt has become more and more of a caricature as he's gone on. And in this movie, he's just like a young, hot-headed, completely out of his depth guy that just works on me really well.
Yeah.
The only thing that doesn't age well about Mission Impossible is the internet.
Yeah, but that to me is just charming at this point. But I agree though.
It's so funny though. Like when he's max@job13.com.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's how that works.
Yeah, and you just keep doing that
in other languages until she finds somehow she's gonna find it. Oh my gosh. That was great. Love Mission Impossible. I want to say that the answer I didn't see here, Matt, that I love particular is a movie called The Lives of Others, which is a movie we did an episode on a few years ago. It's a 2006, I believe it's a German film, right? Yeah. It's about East Germany and kind of eventually about like the fall of East Germany. But through the eyes of like a secret police spying on people, and really incredible film.
We did a Doofcast on that, I believe. What's funny is when we were introducing this question last week, you said, like a movie like where someone peers in on the lives of others. And I almost was like, and then I was like, I'm just going to let it happen and see if anybody picks up on it.
Yeah. I did that on purpose.
Yeah. I sort of thought so. Anyway,
it's a really good movie. If you haven't seen it, let this be the time that we give you recommendations instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Next week, on our question next week, I thought we'd do something a little bit different, but I think something that could have some interesting conversation here. So we talked this week about how Jake behaved to George De Morenschildt and to Jennifer Caltrop, the school board member who decided to stick her nose in someone else's business. And I think we kind of both settled on the idea that, yeah, he was a little harsh to them, maybe just a little bit harsh in how he behaved to both of them and how he perhaps enjoyed fucking with them as much as he did. But I want to turn that question around to you folks. I want to know what you think. So, did they deserve the treatment they got from Jake Epping? Was he entirely fair to them or not? I'm just curious what other people think about this, because sometimes we come down on the side of something and perhaps assume or just figure most people will generally agree with that, and then sometimes they find out that no, that they don't at all. So I'm just really curious.
Yeah, and it's not like we feel an urge to be like on the on the consensus side of the issue. It's just like, I would like to know sort of a temperature check of like, do other people have the same reaction to these moments?
Yeah, I mean, especially the Jennifer Caltrop part of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, she sucks. Mm-hmm. It's indeed, like, very much sucks. Do not like her. But like, I don't know, like, I feel like, in my opinion, the way King wrote the scene, we are meant to feel very uncomfortable by the physical way in which he's dominating the sequence.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if other people feel that same way or not.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah, so I think that'll be a fun one. We don't normally do ones like this, but I thought we'd do something a little bit different as we approach the end of this book. But that's it for us this week. Next week, as we said, 11/22/63 continues as we read chapters 26 through 28. A little bit of a programming note for you here, folks, at the end. We will do our normal episode as scheduled next Thursday. Then the week after that, we will be taking off because we will have been in Bangor, Maine for our live event, and I'm going to be doing a little mini vacation in Maine after Bangor. I'm not going to be back till the following weekend, so we will not have an episode that week. We might, I don't want to overpromise on this, get the live episode recording up for that Thursday, but perhaps not. So we will not be returning to the conclusion of 11/22/63 until the week after that, which will be the episode that's released on the 27th of June. It's all on the schedule if you want to check it out and not just listen to me. But that's how everything's going to go for the next few weeks. A little bit different because we're doing a thing we've never done before.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cool. I mean, it's good to lay all that out, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you have any questions or you want to answer the discussion question, then please send us an email at kingslingerspod@doofmedia.com or head on over to the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia and leave a comment on the post. And of course, you can always get in touch with us via Twitter at kingslingerspod.
And you guys got to buy some merch. I mean, let's be real now. Yeah. Like, if you're coming to Bangor and you haven't bought some merch yet,
that's right.
Well, it's probably too late because I don't know if it'll be there that time. But you should still do it anyway because there's a lot of great stuff on there, and you should get it. I have not been disappointed by anything that I've personally, and I mean, this is not just me being a salesman. Like, I've bought many of the things that we sell on there for myself, and I enjoy them all quite a bit. So you should just head on over to doofmedia.com/my.myshopify, doofmedia.myshopify.com. Really fucked that up. And check out all we have for sale over there, because we try to price it competitively. We don't make a huge amount of money off this stuff. Just to get some merch out there for you folks to enjoy. We hope if you're coming to Bangor, you will be rocking some merch so we can recognize you and get really excited with that. But please check out the store.
That's right. How will we know it's you otherwise?
I think we're gonna have name tags, Matt. Oh, I mean, merch. Fuck.
Gotta have merch.
Did I do it wrong? I'm sorry.
Yeah, God,
Sorry.
Jesus. If you like any of our shows and you want to support us directly, then please head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. And you can donate at any of the available levels, including the level that gives you access to our monthly patron-only exclusive podcast, where we are currently talking about the TV show Castle Rock, season week by week, I guess, episode by episode. Mm-hmm. And previously we were talking about Stephen King adaptations over there. So
yeah, I think our coverage of season 2 should be happening pretty soon, right?
Yeah, we should be doing that.
Watch that. Yeah. Yep. Thank you for reminding me with the outro, Matt. I appreciate that. And if you cannot afford to join our Patreon community, that is absolutely okay. As always, there are tons of ways to help us out. You can share this podcast with everyone. You can just be social and scream it from the rooftops.
Yep.
And you can also always leave us a rating and a review. I really was trying to vamp really hard there, and I can't talk and type at the same time is what I've learned. I just can't do it. We do have a new review this week though from Thrill Matthew, who gives us 5 stars and says, "One of my favorites. I came to Kingslingers late in the game last summer and decided I want to catch up to the current episode. So for the last year, Matt and Scott have been my constant companions." Oh, I'm sorry. So sorry. A wonderful in-depth look at the works of one of my favorite authors. These two keep it lighthearted and funny, while at the same time touching on some of the serious points in King's novels. I'm pleased to say I'm 2 episodes away from being caught up, and I cannot wait to be able to answer discussion questions with the rest of the Kingslingers. I give this podcast all the stars. Thank you, you two, for keeping me company through one of the longest years I've had to live through. I like to think Ka brought me to you. Well, that was so nice. Thank you so much. I'm glad we got to be your companions. I'm glad you enjoyed listening to us, which I mean, to catch up in a year, that must have been like real, like literal constant listening.
Yeah.
So
that is a marathon.
Yeah. We really appreciate that. And we appreciate you coming out of it still liking us, because sometimes I think the stupid ticks that we do, or the fact that I know we've definitely told the same anecdotes multiple times without remembering we've done it, would get annoying to people over time. But I'm glad you are proof positive that no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone else who has taken the time to send those rating and reviews in. We really do appreciate that. And we can't wait to thank many of you in person in just 2 weeks.
Yeah.
My goodness. 1 week.
So excited. Yep.
Yeah. All right, folks. That's it for us this week. We will be back next week for more 11/22/63. Until then, long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.